All right. Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for being patient as we had to scramble and make some clean copies for today because we're expecting to get some work done. So just everybody hopefully has a copy of an agenda, and we're going to review what we proposed last time, and then just some housekeeping, you know, that we're Zoom broadcasting to employees. Oh. And this won't include the caucus or sidebar.
Somebody needs to mute.
So sidebar and caucus is not broadcast, that's closed. And just, I know, I just put this on the agenda, and I know Ms. Kelly King already responded. You know, we got notice of election for the instructional and the clerical unit, and that's just all kind of tied to this. And I know we're working on that eligibility list, so everyone will be good to go. So thank you. So we're reconvening to talk about language, and I just wanted to kind of say something. You know, I know it's been a while since we've been back together, and that we appreciate, you know, this time to re-engage. And I think that both the board's team, your team, and our team understand that. We understand that the process has been significantly delayed, but that was not our shared desire. I think it's been very clear and intentional that both the school board and HCTA has intended to accomplish a lot of work during the end of the school year, but the Florida legislature exceeded its constitutionally scheduled time and their end date more than 6 weeks. And they failed to complete the one task they're really only charged to do, which is to pass a budget. So that delay created this ripple effect across districts across the state, and Hillsborough was not spared that. So I just want to make that clear to those that are listening, and then that in this space that we all understand that, you know, we have had lots of discussions and intentional. I mean, as early as, you know, the first semester of last school year, we were talking about this in January and February and looking at getting to the table. But those budget delays in the legislature have put us where we are now. So we're excited to kind of look at some of your counter proposals, and we know that we kind of have a time certain to break around 3 and then reconvene with the instructional team, and we'll start there with budget stuff. So, all
right, sounds good.
Passing it on to you.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things I wanted to clarify as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's not the norm, right? It's so far out of the norm. Even those who have been, you know, looking at it over the course of the last 20, 30 years, to receive the budget as late as we did is challenging, especially in a challenging budget year, right? So it's so we will work through it, and the timeline will be a little bit, you know, altered than what we had intended originally, and we may not have all the information completely where we normally would have been if we had received the budget at the beginning of May. Right. So, all right, awesome. So I have kind of 2 paths today, so I wanted to just discuss it. So we obviously have reviewed all of the language proposals you presented back on April 23rd. And then we also have our own proposals that we want to bring to the table. So we really can go 2 paths. We can go through everything you've presented and do that first, and then we can go ahead and pass out some of the ones that we wanted to propose, if that works for you.
That sounds good.
All right, awesome. All right. So pulling out the packet from April 23rd. So what we did as a team is we went through and just to, you know me, I want to be transparent from the front end. It's going to be a challenging budget year.
Right.
So a lot of the language that has financial implications is going to be very difficult this year. But we will go line by line and item by item as far as what you presented, because there are some things that we think we can do, and we think there's some things that are great ideas for us to look into further moving into the future as well. Okay. All right. So, all right. I mean, do we want to even?
I mean, I think that we're clear that we're looking to do another 3-year agreement.
Yep.
So that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's do it. Let's get accomplished the, you know, the TAs. And for those of you who don't know, this is a painstaking process that when we do TA something, we TA it, we initial it and date it, and we pass it back and forth, and then we both have copies of it at the end. And then afterwards, the teams work together to actually update. Once everything's ratified and finalized and all that, then we do update the contracts accordingly.
Yes.
So, all right.
And what we're doing is we'll TA it and then we'll have one copy and then share that copy. So.
And TA means tentatively agreed for those who,
Yes.
this is a new process for you.
Okay.
All right.
Woo.
Let's
Okay.
wait on that. Fill it
Yeah,
updated correctly.
Unless, I mean, this was your, basically, you know, this is the school board's team and bargaining team members, so,
Yeah,
you know,
we'll
if
wait
you want
on-
to come back.
we'll
and
come
let
back
us
to
know.
that.
Okay.
As well as the next page we can come back to. All right.
Staff and table of
Yeah.
contents.
Yep. We always come back to the table of contents because as we change things.
Yeah, and, based on some of the work we've done,
Yeah.
I'll look at the clerical units
Perfect.
and the paraprofessional unit. That would be pages 6, 7, and 8.
Correct. All right. Page 9. Earth shattering, I know.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so here we were just cleaning up the capitalization. So
Yep.
yes, we are in agreement to capitalize clerical and
Okay.
paraprofessional bargaining units.
That's page 9.
Page 9. Perfect. All right. Page 12, we have reviewed this as a team as well as with legal, and we are proposing that we leave the contract language as is.
Is there any, anything you can tell us about,
Yeah,
you know?
well, some of the details are extremely detailed. So, and things do change over time. So everything from the statutory language can change, what the technology is to test can change. And this is not an area that we feel needs changing.
So will you be taking it out of the HSCF contract? Some of the language that we pulled?
We may propose some of that. But that is for, we have not gone through, they're not in a language year. So that's something that we will review.
So that's all of the new that we proposed.
That would be page 12, 13, 14, 15. All right. Page 16, there wasn't language, but I know we had discussed what the protocol is if you want to update a job description.
Yeah, there was no proposal there. It was just a discussion. on
Correct,
that
correct.
piece.
So I think we did discuss what the process is, as well as we had talked about moving forward if we did want to pull together a committee to look at some job descriptions that we felt were not matching what their actual jobs were. So we would be open to that. Go to page 17.
Oh.
All right. 5.1.2.
Yes.
We are not in agreement to put this in the language because we don't have good clarification on what it would look like coming from other districts, because some districts have different requirements. So we want further explanation on what it would look like in other districts and which classifications and qualifications you're talking about. So we want to hold on this and look at it a little further.
And you say that again. So you want us to.
Well,
help
right here it says,
show-
once an ESP is tested and or certified for a classification, that is in the current language, or has the documented equivalent classification from another public school district. Every district has different requirements.
Right.
So I would need to have more examples on ones that don't have different requirements. So we want to make sure that they're meeting our requirements. And if our requirements are higher, if we're just going based on a para qualification, then how would we know that looking at what Sumter County says they're qualified to be a para? We don't know that that means that they meet our classification. So unless there's a state requirement for something, that would be almost like teaching, right? We know that if you're certified to teach in a district with the state, then you're certified in all the districts in the state. We would need an example of when this could be shown that it is the same from district to district.
Okay.
Because we don't know that it is.
I don't know. you have anything to talk about what your team meant on that, but I think something that, we talk about a lot in, what we do here, with, I mean, a job description in and of itself, right? So if we've got someone who's been a paraprofessional over in Pinellas County, paraprofessional, they're applying to a job here, and here's the job description to compare. And,
we're just not comfortable because we don't know if they've gone through the same safety requirements that we have. So if a paraprofessional is a perfect example, right? We want them to go through our requirements to make sure that they have hit all those safety requirements that they need to take care of our most fragile students.
So how are those documented here then? So if we hire a paraprofessional and then they go through those requirements, are those documented?
Yeah, then that's when they get the certification, or the competency would be the better way to say it.
So if another district has that,
if you could show that it was equivalent, we would need to review that to see if we'd be willing to put it in the language. Because right now I can't even think of an example where we would be able to verify that it was equivalent to what we do. Okay. We're open to it, just need to drill down a little further on it. Okay. When safety's involved, it's just, we'd rather err on the side of they have to do more training with us than.
Okay. Understood. Thank
you. All right. 5.1.6. So this is where, for example, someone does receive new qualifications that they want to update their competency. And that's why you guys had used the word competency. There is no way for our system to automatically know that. So we looked into the system capabilities. So we would still need for an employee to turn that into the application center. Once they've turned that into the application center, then that is when their competency is updated. No different than a teacher who gets their master's degree. We don't know they have had their master's degree unless they turn it into the application center. Okay.
So on that one, same, is this just leave language as is?
Correct, yes. No, we're proposing we leave the language as is. Okay. All right. Page 18, 5.1.10. This was adding shall be granted school business time for when employees are interviewing, testing, or qualifying during their workday, and we are in agreement for this. Okay. And we don't know that it really changes what our current practice is. It just clarifies that it's school business.
Yes.
I think the next one that you had proposed language was page 22. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So 7.5.1. You were proposing to put clarification that says if the ESP is required to work beyond 40 hours per week, the employee will be paid overtime pay, and we are in agreement with this. That is 7.5.1. All right. Page 23. 7.7.1. We had during our last contract cycle added that the supplemental pay was $10 more per hour for the hours that paraprofessionals serve as substitute. You were proposing that they also receive that when they absorb additional students. And due to the financial implications here, we are not in agreement for this. Okay. All right. So 8.1.1, you put a hold because that's on, we have a counter to that when we pass across our language.
Okay. 8.1.1.
That is correct. Okay. All right, going to 8.2.1.
Yep.
All right, so we have partial that we want to, let me read what we would like to strike and what we would like to consider.
Okay.
So paraprofessionals shall be given salary credit for all. We'd like to strike experience from other public school districts.
Okay.
So it would read instead, paraprofessionals shall be given salary credit for all Hillsborough County Public School teaching and paraprofessional experience as defined in this agreement. And as an example, if you had a teacher, they were a classroom teacher and they transferred to a paraprofessional position, currently they do not receive that experience credit.
Right.
But this they would, because that experience is relevant, obviously, to being a paraprofessional in the classroom, which is why we think it's a really good idea.
Okay. Okay. So I'm not gonna TAX, I just want to be able to
Okay, sounds good.
talk to the team, but thank you for
Understood.
that.
All right. 9.1.1.2 and 0.3. We are not in a position to agree to this at this time. There's a financial implication, obviously, to adding 2 paid holidays. In addition, even though this doesn't mean, we have to look at it through the overall district, and if we feel that it would be a large implication if we especially did it district-wide. I know that's not, you're here to bargain for your employees. However, we feel that that would probably need to be a consideration that we looked at district-wide with the way we do calendars and things like that. Okay. All right. Same thing with 9.2. It's going to go overall.
Okay.
The key piece here, obviously, was moving our 7.5-hour paraprofessionals to 8 hours. That would be at a cost of approximately $6 million.
This is, sorry, just let me to be clear, because 9.2 is where we've tried, this has been a priority of our getting everyone on an 8-hour day, correct?
Mhm.
So.
Correct. Yep.
And you're saying that all of this 9.2 is 9.2 all?
9.2 all. Specifically 9.2.3
Okay.
would be at a cost of $6 million. It's an estimate. And we would want to be consistent. So consistently right now, employees that have a non-paid lunch receive the 2 15-minute breaks. Okay, non-paid lunch, 2 15-minute breaks. If you have a paid lunch, you do not have the breaks. So by changing some of these, there'd be some inconsistencies with that throughout. So we're proposing that we leave the language as is. The changing from a 7.5 to 8-hour day for paraprofessionals. Mm-hmm. The concept is one that we are open to. Okay. The $6 million is what we are not open to for what that need is right now. Right. We just feel that there's other needs. Okay. All right.
So that's just to be, that's 9.2.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and 0.7 is really a different thing, but we want to leave it as soon as practical.
So to be clear that when we say as soon as practical, I mean, that could be before before the first day of pre-company.
I believe a lot of schools do it before before paraprofessionals leave for the summer. Yeah. But there's times when it can't be before pre-planning. It could be based on the hire date. It could be based on, if someone's hired during pre-planning, then obviously it wouldn't be during pre-planning that you were notified of your schedule. if you have a vacancy, you may need to move schedules around based on what the needs are of the students.
So would you be open to something where it said, maybe we flip flop that, where it is no later than the first day of pre-planning or as soon as practical in situations like that, like hire date, things like.
Be open to any language you want to propose.
Okay. Because I hear what you're saying, you know,
Yeah.
if we say no later than the first day of pre-planning, what you're saying is that restricts in those circumstances. And I think what we're trying to get at is what you just talked about.
Correct.
Most people are getting it.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about that.
And then also having a caveat in there that it can change. Especially with paraprofessionals, you may have a paraprofessional that's in an assignment that the student's needs are less intensive than another place. And if you had a vacancy, you may need to adjust things throughout the year. So that's the challenge with that.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. Right. Turning to page 25. Section 9.2.12. All right. So this here was sharing that conference nights and open house are not to be on the second Thursday of any month, and that is because of rep council, correct? And the exception must be approved by the chief of schools. You were proposing with notification and explanation provided to HCTA, and we are in agreement to do that. Okay.
Yeah, that one, we'll go to the next.
Yep. All right, 9.3.3. We are proposing to leave the language as is. The language itself already says, except in emergencies when danger to the health or well-being of employees, students, or other persons could occur. And on, all overtime duty must be approved by the employee's principal supervisor prior to being performed. Want to clarify that if we have paraprofessionals, because I think this is, when I hear danger to the health, safety, and well-being of students, I automatically think paraprofessionals, right? That could be maybe in a situation where they're on bus duty or something like that, right?
That's what it's definitely
That's the first one that
it's like,
it's really the main one.
we
Yes.
gotta be here,
Yes.
kids, take care of them, yeah.
Well, there's a couple things we need to address. First, if they don't have access to being able to contact someone, we need to work through that, right? Whether it's a radio, the administration is responsible for students left on campus after hours. Okay. So if they don't have access to a radio, then we need to figure that out. And I think principals in the room would say that if you have someone on bus duty that is with a late bus, we need to have, they need to have access to an administrator. However, like you mentioned, if in good faith they stay and they weren't able to contact someone, the Fair Labor Standards Act, if someone works, we need to pay them. So there's no need to put this specific language in the contract, because if someone works when they did not have approval, they need to be paid for it. However, if they're working without approval and they're consistently doing that, that also could be a performance concern if it wasn't an emergency, right? So we really think the language as it is addresses what the concern is. And if there's other concerns, like employees feeling like they're on an island by themselves at bus duty with our fragile students, then we need to address that.
Okay. So I think that's helpful, because, you know, I think, and this is a good time to kind of talk with the teams too about, you know, when there's language that's been there a long time and issues come up, the table is a good time, even if we're not agreeing to something, that having this discussion on the record is important, because then it adds just exactly what you're saying,
Right.
that clarity that, you know, under Fair Labor Standards Act, if you're doing that in good faith,
Correct.
communicating, just as we're explaining here, then we should be honoring that.
Correct.
But yeah, not just taking advantage, riding the clock, if you will.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so thank you for explaining that on the record.
No problem. All right. Turning to page 26. We had already mentioned that we were, actually, I we're not in agreement to change the vacation language to be all employees. So I think we already addressed that earlier when we said not to the 2 paid holidays, but at the same time, I just want to address that 10.1 and 10.14, we want to leave as is, that only 12-month ESP employees are eligible for vacation at this time, okay? Which then would be 10.2.1 would then be not relevant.
Okay.
All right. Now, if we go to 11.1.1,
Mhm.
and this is about the evaluation and developmental process.
Yeah.
You would propose to put in clarification that it is done together with the employee. We're in agreement for that. And then also that nothing in this provision shall deny the administrator from receiving input from appropriate non-managerial personnel not included in the same bargaining unit as the employee. We're in agreement for that as well. And that's what should be happening, but I think like you putting things, clarification is always a good step for everybody.
Right.
Okay. 11.3.1. We're in agreement to put Appendix D.
Okay.
And then we would like to leave it as is for prior to the written assessment. And again, it's more about being defined with the dates and things like, so here it says at the start of pre-planning, but no later than September 15th. And very similar to what you mentioned, what we mentioned in the other section about receiving schedules. I just think this is too exacting, knowing that we have employees that are hired all throughout the year. Okay. And if you have a counter to that, that would be aligned to the other, then we're open to that.
Okay. So let me put a hold on this.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then we have 11.3.7, which you were proposing to move it to Article 13,
Right.
which we are in agreement to do that once we get there.
Okay.
We'll get there in blue in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it didn't really make sense not being its own section.
Okay.
All right. All right, so here in the title of performance support plan, we'll be going forward with what we're going to TA in a moment, but we are in agreement to change the process from career observation to performance support plan.
Okay.
So let's go through that obviously the title would have to go with it.
Right. So essentially we're gonna TA it. I'm just marking it so we can TA these pages.
Yeah.
I know this one page we'll probably hold on just because of,
What
we can probably just, this is the striking of the.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So here's what I'm gonna do. Wait. On page 28, I TA'd this part up here.
Yep.
And then we'll TA the title there. Unless you want to wait till we go through it all and then come back and TA the title.
I think we can do it now.
Okay, and now we'll go through page 29.
Okay. So 29, so let's look at 12.3.
Yep.
Okay. So we are in agreement for the changes to performance support plan. And like you had shared, it mirrors the HSEF contract. And not that things have to mirror one contract versus another, but when things have been more successfully implemented, then that's a great thing that we borrow from each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So So yes, we're in agreement for 12.3.1. Now, if you look back up in 12.2.2,
Yep.
you'll see career
yeah.
observation there.
Mhm.
And then in 12.2.3, there's a typo after the word effort in the last line.
Oh, yeah, an extra T there.
I think it's actually, it shall make an effort to. I think we're missing an
Okay,
O.
to place.
Yeah. And then the rest of it would be TAing what's in blue. I had one more on page. Oh, I'll wait till you do that first.
Okay, we're still on page 29.
No, let's do that first. Yep.
So I just,
Sorry.
So
got it.
pretty much all of page 29 with the change to 12.2.2, career observation to performance support plan, PSP, and then
Correct.
fixing the typo in 12.2.3.
Yep.
Everything on this page is good.
That is correct.
So I'm just gonna do like a yay full page.
Well, and I think we might like, look at that. I think that has to be struck too, doesn't it?
With approval from the administrator, but then it goes into this, that,
I know, the principal. Oh, okay, got it. Nope. No, that makes sense.
because then that would be removed, and then it would start with the principal supervisor will monitor.
No, great. So then page 29, oh no, we already did that, sorry. Page 30, right? So page 30 looks good.
Yeah, there
You
was
just have that one, yep, that needs to go to the next line, the little asterisk on the first.
Put a move.
Yep.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
yep,
looks good.
all of
then.
that's good. All right, page 31, letter C for
Yeah, that's
all of the rest of that. 12.3.3, 12.3.4, 12.3.5, that is changing career observation to performance support plan.
Mhm.
We're in agreement for that.
Okay. And striking all that red,
Yes,
okay? And then this is where we
yes,
literally move those.
correct.
disciplinary-
Yep,
okay.
and that's what I put, not new, just moved, and
Yeah.
we are in agreement for that.
Okay. I individually just wrote this,
Okay,
even though it's the whole page.
that's all right. Makes it look way more.
Yeah. You guys good down there?
I know, it's painful.
Is there a typo? Oh, okay.
Are we, we're there?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so. 13.1.
13.1A, under the verbal reprimand. Administrator may take a note.
Oh, no, sorry, we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Sorry. The next page, they're working ahead.
Oh, gotcha.
I was reading ahead, sorry.
Because it's gonna be, I
Yeah,
think
that's-
it would actually be 13.3.1, right? That's what you're looking at? 13.3.1?
I think that language, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Brown, what's interesting is that's the current language, but if it's a typo that's in the current language, we can correct it now. So.
Okay, so we're looking at 13.1.
Mhm.
It seems like it is to me. I don't.
Look
know
at verbal,
if
letter A,
Uh-huh.
number 1, no written conference summary is placed in personnel file, but the administrator may take a note of the discussion in a work site file.
Should be made clear.
Yes, I
Mhm.
agree.
Yeah.
So let me
So we need to, where else that's here.
Mhm.
here. I'm just gonna.
In the personal.
So it would be, no written conference summary is placed in the personnel file.
Yes,
So again, it's a term, take it out.
I
I
know.
think that's where it's coming
Is that what it
from.
is?
I think, I don't know, I don't.
Is that what it is?
So I'm just gonna initial my little changes there.
Yeah.
Over there on the
Oh,
side.
yeah.
Whatever you wanna do. Okay,
Got it.
we got it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is the time to do it.
Yes.
I literally copied and pasted it, so.
We only do the whole contract every 3 years. This year was 2 years ago because of
Yes, yeah.
unique situations with
Yeah,
COVID and
yes,
other things. All right, so now we're on page 32.
yeah,
All right, so the remaining 13, that's all still just what was moved,
yep.
correct? Yep.
That's all 13 or 13.2, 13.2.1, 0.2, 0.3.
And then stop, because
Yeah.
then, yep, so that part is obviously just being moved, so we're in agreement for that. All right. All right, so then 13.3.1, and when we had met, we had mentioned that we wanted to work with legal to
Mhm.
reference this anytime there's something that's discussing just cause and legal terms. So we consulted with legal and we are in agreement to make these changes.
Okay.
And I had to dig deep to kind of think, because it really wasn't saying anything different, but I'm thinking that your thought was just cause is not the offense. Just cause is the process.
Correct.
Yes. So it took me a minute to get to why you were wanting to
Yeah.
change that, but
And I think, our Office of Professional Standards and HR understand that it's
Yeah.
not just somebody said you did this thing.
Right.
We actually have to go through that process and your investigators work with us and.
Right.
And we work through that. So that
Yeah.
was the goal there. So,
okay.
and then I think the rest, page 33 and 34.
Just the numbers.
and- Yeah, or just the numbers,
Mhm.
so. We'll just. And then there was an update because some of the numbers changed.
This is tape. Wait, yeah, this is mine. Sorry.
Okay.
Lots of paper.
Keeping them all sorted. Page 36.
Okay.
15.1.4.
Got it. All right. So, 15.1.4, we would like to leave the language as is. There's just times when this is not feasible. And then if you look at 15.1.5,
Mhm.
we are in agreement with this language. So this is basically saying existing employees in a department or at the work site shall be considered for job openings prior to advertisement. It allows the principal or the supervisor to, move employees within a work site before advertising and then needing to wait 5 days to move the person internally that you were already going to move. So, so we think that's a very good suggestion.
We agree.
Yeah.
Pretty.
All right, so we are not in agreement to change this language. This is the funeral leave language. Sorry, 17.3.1, page 40.
Any discussion on rationale on the no?
We were gonna propose to strike it all together, so we just figured we'll just leave it. I kind of got an impression of whether you would be open to that by this proposal, so we didn't bring that proposal
So
today.
So the board was looking to actually take back.
We want to be consistent with all employees, and currently, we only have funeral leave with ESP and HSEM. We do not have it for instructional, non-rep, or administrative?
I got a better way to make it more consistent.
Which we have proposed many times.
Is it, is there,
Offer it to everyone.
is there a financial impact to that?
That's for you to tell me.
Yes, there is.
I
There
don't
is.
know that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
there is. But so right now, I mean, and we're not looking to take it away, like, but that was something we were looking at, that we want to be consistent within our contracts, because what happens is you'll have a principal secretary that calls. They work all day, right? And they're doing payroll. They have members of their team that they're ESPs that just got funeral leave. Then they suffer a loss and they call payroll or employee relations and they don't get it. And it just creates some real inconsistencies. But if we're going to add, let me think. So we have approximately 7,000 employees right now that are eligible for it. We would be adding 13,000 that are not eligible for it. We don't think at this time that is where that financial impact is the priority.
And the financial impact being the substitutes that then cover these positions when people have these losses.
Pay days. I mean, people have sick time. And
But I mean, but if you're arguing, you're
No.
giving it a solution to the problem other than the funeral. That's what I'm saying.
all right, I see what you're saying, but
Yeah,
no, the financial impact is that people are not using their sick time and the
Right.
district is paying for that day,
understood.
right?
If you were to budget for that, so you have to budget for, you just said approximately 7,000 employees. So
Mhm.
there's a way that that's done. Is there a way that if we were then to say for 13,000 employees, what that would look like? What impact on the budget would that be?
I guess the only way to do it would be to take a ratio, because that's an
Right.
unknown cost, right? And in addition, you were looking to extend it with this language. So it's already an unknown cost to extend it to other employees,
Right,
but then to extend it, open it up even wider here
right.
was not something that we were open to.
Yeah, I guess the question I'm getting at is how do you budget when if you've got 7,000 employees that are eligible, what is that budget number? Is there a budget number for that? Like,
We look at past data.
okay, and so
Really the
is
only
there
way to do
like let's say over 5 years or year to year?
We'd have to look
Could you-
year to year.
Could you
We'd look
provide
at,
that to us so we could
We
that
look
way
at the
we
last-
understand
yeah,
it and then we can
absolutely.
understand, okay, if this, because we have instructional coming, right? We haven't talked to that team yet, but you know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. I know where you're
because
coming.
we've
Now I hear it.
proposed for the last, 2 years that I've been, but I think that's important,
This is why
even when
Rob
we're,
went, "What?"
Well, personally, I'm just shocked when you said that you were thinking about asking to remove it.
Really more for
Again.
consistency, not because
Again,
we're
right,
opposed
and
to it.
we want consistency too.
Correct.
and we've proposed it, both years for instructional. But even when looking at, okay, if we're gonna expand it, at least if we know what the impact is year over year and how it's been, like, if we look at the year prior and then that's what we budget for, then we can at least kind of start to get a picture of like, okay, 7,000 employees, this is a snapshot of what that looks like.
We can get you
Okay,
historical data over the last 3 to 5 years of how many funeral leave days were taken
Yeah.
by the employee groups that are eligible for it.
yes, that'd be
Now,
great.
as far as being able to predict what the local vicinity, like
Sure.
the expansion of it, that's
Yeah,
more difficult, but it still give you a ballpark.
yeah, but I think it's just, at least we have the base, right?
Correct.
We know what the impact is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't bring it. Because I was like, hey.
For the record, I think the argument is weak and we should be going the other way and giving it to everyone. I just want to be very, very clear about that and expect that we brought to the table next year for instructional. So we should have all that data there.
So noted.
That's what I was saying.
Got it.
All right, thank you for that.
All right. Page 44?
Yes,
Is that right? Okay.
17.7.1 down there at
Yes.
the bottom.
All right, so when ESP employees desire to attend a conference, convention, workshop, et cetera, during their normal workday, we're in agreement with that. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah,
Because it already says that it's approved, and obviously you wouldn't be asking for approval if it was outside of your workday, but
right. We just get a lot, when there are
Mhm.
required trainings or things like that. In our time together, we're
Yeah.
always getting that question. just to be clear,
Yeah.
this is paid, right? Or it's not required if it's not. So it's just continuing to add that consistency everywhere we can, so employees understand that.
Yeah.
If it's during your workday, you're paid and so on and so forth.
Understood. All right. Page 45, section 17.7.3. This was a proposal to, for the NEA micro-credentials.
Yeah.
We are not in agreement for this, but what we would like to do, like we brought some of the courses that we do with our professional learning department. And what we would like to be able to do is collaborate on what courses or micro credentials is NEA offering that maybe we can incorporate into our professional learning sequence of courses.
Okay. All right, put a flag on this. We
Mhm.
might have some creative ideas on.
Yeah.
The instructional, Marie, remind me, I know we talked about it, and I can't remember if it was ESP or instructional, a committee that would look at these. Did we not talk about that last
We
year?
did. I don't
I can't
remember if it was
which
last year.
contract.
I'm right there with you. Yep. I don't,
Yeah. All right.
I don't remember if it was ESP or instructional, but I do think whichever contract it was in, we put in there
Yeah, I'm gonna,
that we want to committee that. And
Yeah,
if we don't follow through with that,
yeah, but I think,
not gonna
yeah,
happen.
if we're not utilizing a community, I feel like it's in here somewhere.
I
So
think
we'll,
it
in the
is
break,
too.
in the caucus, we'll look
Yeah.
for it. Because I think that, yeah, I mean, I think,
We need to make sure that's
I
happening.
believe that if you all saw the micro credentials that we're talking about for ESPs.
We did research it.
Yeah,
we did,
and maybe it is, that committee slowly looks at like, okay, these are the 10 or 12 that we're good now, and then,
Yeah.
then that committee can then make proposals to like implement this language properly over time. So I'll research, we'll look at it in the break
Okay.
and see if maybe there's a way we can apply the NEA micro-credential goal in that language, because I'm pretty sure it was.
I think so
It was
too.
my first year. It was the year we did the whole book. We talked
It
about
was.
this committee, so, okay.
Can I just clarify? So we're
Yeah.
not, you're not saying yes, like a wholesale
Mhm.
yes,
You
we'll
want to
take them. We want to kind of crosswalk them with the PD department to make sure that is that where we're at with it? Is that what
Well,
you're
and
saying?
especially because of the financial impact with,
Sure.
that, so we would like, if we offer a course that's the same course.
Right.
then-
I got you.
Right,
Good
right,
way to
right.
work.
Yeah.
We figured that's out.
Yeah, and some of them
You have
that
a
we looked
copy of
at.
that
Yeah.
flyer? You might have to take that.
Yeah, you can. And that's just one flyer that they were advertising. They have other course offerings, but that one, it was interesting that we saw some overlap in the courses that, which of course, because they're good topics, right? That's why both areas are focusing on those. Now, you as a union don't pay for your members to get micro credentials, do you?
Yeah, so a lot of what we run out of what is called our CTEC Ed, which is a partnership between HCTA and the
Mhm.
district that creates CTEC Ed. A lot of the offerings we do are free to members.
Okay.
So that is kind of something that we are looking at, that if there's an opportunity that we can offer it out of, NEA in our building free to members, and even if it coexists or is something that is, hey, this is the same training that we've got with PD.
Right.
Because sometimes, we can offer them at different times that people could come in. So, all those things can kind of look at with that committee. Yeah, if I could find it.
And I think it is, and you're right, we did both books the same year, so I feel like it's in ESP, but it might be instructional.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are in favor of people seeking professional learning on their own, like
Right.
that's a great thing. We just has to be a,
Here it is, 18.5.3.
Good.
So it's actually on the next page.
oh, it was hiding. Oh, there it is. Page 50, everyone. 18.5.3. The school district and association shall establish the school community professional learning committee. Yep, we called it that. I don't know if I like what we called it, but we called it that. It's very long. For purposes of implementing related Florida statutes and or professional development. ESP committee appointee shall be appointed by CTA. The committee will meet at least once each year as needed and will provide any recommendations to the board and association. So
Okay.
I think one first step in this is to have this
Actually
committee actually meet,
Perfect.
you know, so I think that would be good.
I'm just going.
Kelly?
Got it. Okay,
All right, good. All right.
so now we're gonna go back to 17.16.1, right?
Yes, yep.
Gotcha.
We had a lot of discussion about this and we understand the challenges around it.
Mhm.
We just, ultimately, we have to be committed to our students having the services they need in the classroom. That's why we have educational leave. So if employees need to, you know, are going for their full-time program, as far as an internship or whatever it might be, they're going, you know, we're gonna still need to do it that way instead of them being where we need to cover them with a substitute or have a vacancy, which ultimately with our paras, that's a challenge. And we understand the challenge that we also want to recruit paras to be teachers and we want to support them through that. So it's
Right.
there's a conflict there with
Okay.
wanting, both things are important.
Okay.
All right, page 50. This is another one of the partials that we would like to strike the blue that says, that has all the different kinds of events.
Okay.
This was mostly focused on open house.
Mhm.
But then we also do want to clarify that if an employee is asked to be at the request of their supervisor to be at an event like that, that they absolutely need to be granted comp time if they're being asked to be there. So for that second part where it says, therefore, ESP employees who attend open house or other student parent engagement events at the request of their supervisor will be granted comp time. So we're in agreement to add or other student parent engagement events, just for clarity. I
Okay.
believe that's what's happening now.
Okay.
But so that employees know that they don't just get comp time for open house. I think a key piece that we always need to make sure it's at the request of your supervisor. If your school is doing give me an event, elementary does these a lot. What do you? Yeah, and then sometimes you have like, yeah, Bookoween and, you know,
Mhm.
yes, and at the request of your supervisor, because we do pay out comp time at the end of the fiscal year, we have to be cautious with that. And if you just go to an event on your own, that's at your school, then that's not what we're talking about here. At the request of your supervisor, an example would be you ask your bilingual paraprofessional to work conference night to translate for your monolingual parents that are coming. So that's where we just want to be very careful that these are still at the request of the supervisor, and it's
Right.
really only as needed, but that's for us to communicate with the leaders, which
Right.
we've
Okay.
done. We're still working on some final numbers on what the comp time payout is for the 24-25 year.
Yeah,
And
that'll
once
be
we
good
have
to
that,
know.
we'll share it.
Very good, yeah.
But it's a concern.
Okay.
All right.
So marking that when I come back to you,
Yep.
because what I hear is that you're definitely, I mean, you're saying essentially yes to those things we listed.
And I don't know if they should be broken into two
But-
different sections, to be honest with you. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just thinking, ESP employees' attendance at each school's annual open house or other student parent engagement activities is voluntary. However, the parties recognize the importance of these activities to the school community. Therefore, ESP employees who attend open house or other student parent engagement activities. So we'll look at it, because I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying is that, you're basically saying, yeah, we do support them, but you definitely want to keep out the request of their supervisor. Because we're being clear that it's voluntary and it's a request, right? Not so I hear like no to the first part, but yes to the second part, so.
And I see the, yeah.
I hear what you're
I think we
saying.
need to reword it somehow
Okay.
that it clearly shows that at the request of their supervisor, due to the needs of the students or due to the needs of the community, because
Right.
it can't just be because you want everybody there, because we can't
Right,
sustain that.
right, and I think, I don't think that this is coming out of a place where it's like, we want to add. I think it's coming from a place of, these are things that have traditionally been done. The shift to, now we're paying out comp time unused has led to people now not being included. And that's been a cultural shift that, and maybe that's a lack of communication to say, it's not that you're not important,
Yeah.
this is where that's coming from. So I think these are things that our employees, what we're hearing is, we've done this year after year, we do the book of wean and we do the different things, but now we're being told not to come. Right. And so, then those that are going, want to preserve that. So,
It's
but
a challenge.
I hear it. So I'm just put a tab on this. We'll come back to it. So we'll talk about with our team and see if maybe there's something we can come back to.
Okay.
And if we can't, we'll look at it. So.
All right. All right.
Yeah. I even had on my last one still a request of that. So we knew that was
Yeah.
important, not just you're showing up on your own.
And this isn't for you to monitor, but we have to, due to the financial impact of this,
Sure.
we need to continue to train our leaders that it's only as needed. It's not, it's not, you invite everybody, and I'll give as a high school principal, the example that by the fourth conference night, it's pretty much a ghost town. I don't need 4 secretaries to work the main office on that conference night.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just being fiscally responsible, and that's on us to make sure that we are putting those guidelines in place for our leaders.
And I think that's where this is where this is all stemming from, right? We were for years and years, yes, everybody come.
Yes.
Tons of comp time.
Yes.
And then, we've talked for multiple years now about the impact of comp time on hourly employees.
Correct.
Because there's a cultural shift, and we know that change is tough. So I do think it is a communication piece on,
And you're right. We knew this year was going to be a challenge because it was a change, right?
Yeah.
Before you would tell everybody, sure, everybody come because it's comp time and there's no financial impact theoretically.
And maybe to your point, maybe it's time that we look at what conference night is and how we go about it and that whole process. The idea of having a ghost town like conference night seems counterproductive for everything that we're talking about, even in this around it. So.
And I can only speak as a high school principal because I do think that it looks different at different grade bands.
Yeah. Yeah, I know speaking ahead of with instructional, we've looked at that language too, especially in a post-COVID world where now we're, use of, virtual tools and things like that are allowing for more communication than before.
Okay.
So,
No, that makes sense.
Thank you for that
You're
discussion
welcome.
and understanding. So we'll look at that.
All right, page 52.
Yeah.
So 18.9.6. This is language that is already in the instructional contract, and you're proposing to put it in, and we are in agreement for that.
Okay.
All right, and then 18.14.1, we are not in agreement for this. We would encourage employees to use their personal days if they want to volunteer to attend a field trip that is not at their school.
Okay. Moving right along.
Yeah, we're getting there. 20.2.5.
Yes.
Now the current language, just we're looking to propose that we leave the language as is, but the current language says school-based clerical ESP shall not be solely responsible for monitoring students who have been sent to the office for disciplinary reasons. We are proposing that we leave that as is and not agree to and shall not have a student in their workspace for more than 1 hour.
Okay. So, and I just want to kind of reiterate where that came from because, you know, not solely responsible, but what ends up happening is that student may still be in that space for that long time and then it leads to this problem of someone ultimately being solely responsible. So that was why we were proposing, you know, a time or, you know, something there.
I understand the
That's
intent
what- that's
behind
what's-
it,
that's
and I
what's happening.
think what we would want to do is when those situations are happening,
Mhm.
let's address them, right? Let's address those because the language already shows that they're not to be solely responsible for monitoring the students. But then,
Okay.
yeah. There.
I don't know why I have to. Might have left this one in by accident.
I don't know. That was all I had.
Yeah, nothing on 57. 63 was insurance. And 56. It's just the dates on page 66.
Did I miss another page?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't.
Just,
Oh, yes.
I do it.
Just a typo,
Yeah.
yeah. Or we could just start calling.
I'm sure that it's the same thing happens with my name, but when I'm typing it, I get it
Yes.
right, but
I'm sure you get 2 T's a lot.
well, the last name I get.
Yeah. Oh, that too, yeah.
Oh, Vanny.
Oh, that's what yeah. That's what we were talking about.
All right, well, we can, I'll put a hold on this one, we can come back to it. Okay. Yeah, the only other thing was that appendix D, we had proposed actually including the evaluation tool.
And I think we
in the
put that in,
contract.
and we did, and I
Did
said
we?
that was good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just.
Yeah.
Yay.
It might have been one of the paragraphs that you had on
Yeah.
hold because it was part of a paragraph.
We do have a stack of TAs. So that's
We
great.
do, we
can
do, that's
talk to
awesome.
That before we leave.
All right.
And then.
Now, we do have proposals.
All right.
Are we ready to, do we
Yeah,
want to
I
push
think-
through?
I think go ahead and get your proposals, because you know, we've only got about 30 minutes before we
Yeah.
take our scheduled break.
Yeah.
And then this way, you know, because we've got our little tabs here too that we need to work on as a team, so, it'll be good.
I don't know if I think I have enough.
Five. Six. No, hiding.
I'll tell you later.
And we got a couple of extra.
Oh, okay. You got it.
This can be our
Okay.
clean ones, I guess. I'll save those for next time.
Perfect.
I'll put them in my bag. Look, no, I'll put it here,
Sure.
put it here and here.
We do need to go there, but.
One more?
Not that much. Thank you.
You guys just keep popping up down there. All right. I have 2 extras just in case, so. All right.
Okay. Now, a lot of this, I'll kind of talk through each one. Some of it is for consistency. And the reason we do think consistency across employee units is important is for clarity, lack of confusion, but obviously each thing that we're bringing forward, we have a rationale behind it. So I'll just kind of touch on each one really quickly.
Okay.
All right, so 8.1.1.
Okay.
This was something new that we added prior to our last contract cycle. There was no clerical credit at all, right? Okay. So when we allow outside work experience across all of our employees in other units, we max it at 7 years of outside work experience so that even if they are receiving work experience, they're not completely jumping over our current employees, right? So if we don't put a limit, then someone might be working outside, we bring it in, and we can only tell so much as far as how relevant it is to their current position, but we do the best we can to evaluate it. So we are proposing that we put a limit on this. It wasn't needed when we first put it in the language because we were saying effective July 1. So I think we weren't being forward thinking enough to say, well, let's put some kind of max on that. So we're proposing that for clerical shall be given salary credit for all related work experience as a clerical employee earned after July 1, 2023. And if you remember, we did that so that they were not getting credit for more than what our current employees had, and up to a maximum of 7 years is what we're proposing. Now, nurses, in the paragraph, in your proposal, and that's why I said we could come back to it, you were proposing for nurses to have work experience. And there is obviously, nursing is a critical shortage area, and we are open to them having outside work experience coming in. So we think it should be its own section, not in with clerical, because nurses really aren't clerical. So we're proposing that nurses shall be given salary credit for all related work experience as a nurse up to a maximum of 7 years. And of course, that is always verifiable, meaning that they do have to submit. We have it for all of our, just like instructional and all that, we have forms that they would fill out where their former employer would fill that out so we could verify it.
Right.
Okay. All right. So 10.1.2, let's skip that one for a second and go to 12.1.1 because they're kind of connected. So with the move to the performance support plan, we were looking at some of that language and how employees are supported through when they're having challenges. So we are proposing that much like our employees that the HSEF employees that currently are on performance support as their support plan, for lack of a better way of saying it, that we move the probationary period to 12 months to align with that. Now, currently we have a situation where we have that. Okay, let's think about what ESP is. ESP currently has a 6-month probationary period. And if there's struggles, we can extend it for an additional 6 months and put them on career observation. So, and then we had the old process. We're proposing that much like we have in the HSEF contract, the probationary period be 12 months and there's no extension after that, right? But however, we use the performance support plan if there are concerns. So that's what we are proposing here, to change it from 6 months to 12 months, and then you wouldn't extend it if it was 12 months.
But you're still saying that, let's say 6 months in, there are performance issues, you would be put on the performance support plan.
You could be put on a performance support plan anytime throughout if it meets the criteria that we just agreed to.
Even in the probationary.
Yeah.
Well, what it doesn't do by moving it straight from 6 to 12, the 6 month stop has, I guess, with the probationary period, if it ends there, they know where they're at. If it's not, then they're going to a career observation process, correct?
The current process.
Right.
We believe that what happens more times than not, there's not a whole lot of extensions.
Okay.
Okay. We believe employees, their principals are coming up on that 6 months. Someone's struggling. They're like, we're going to let them go. for performance concerns. They're not extending them and then putting them on career observation. So ultimately, it's creating, because it's work. I mean,
No, I hear you.
right?
I hear
Career
your point,
observation,
yes.
so instead of giving them 7 months, 8 months, maybe to go, but by extending it to 12 months, people have a longer probationary period to see if employees who need more support can be successful. We need these employees.
We gotta turn it on. I think it's that. Maybe I did the wrong one. There we go.
No, I just wanted to make a comment in regards to ESPs being during that first 6 months. And I think that kind of goes back to the evaluation and the importance of that being shown and explained to the ESP and sit down and work with them so they'll understand it. And so I just wanted to make that comment on why we on our end were looking to stress a time frame on the evaluation, because to be honest, we have heard a lot where even within the first 6 months, they have not even seen that evaluation, let alone know what all of their expectations are.
Okay, understood. That makes sense. So in all actuality, going from 6 to 12, we think actually gives our employees who need more support more time.
Yeah.
Performance support plan.
Okay.
It's 12 months,
Yeah.
and it comes to 6 months, principal's gonna just say, just an example, but I have a whole year, I don't need to say anything, because they're on probation anyway, so I don't need to do anything in 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's the concern. If we're saying, well, we're gonna make it 12 months, but we're gonna do the performance plan. Well,
Right.
So
then
they
what,
should
what's the
state-
difference of saying, well, in 6 months?
There's nothing
they're
here
showing-
that says it's mandated to do the performance support plan, because the performance support plan came from a written warning of,
Right.
verbal and written warning.
Right.
You could do a performance support plan at any time.
Right.
So we're proposing that we move it
Okay,
to 12
yeah.
months.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
there's a
hear you.
reason that both contracts do it,
Sure.
and there's positives and negatives to both.
Yeah.
But that is our rationale behind it. It
I
gives
gotcha.
employees more time. And it aligns all of our groups, because even instructional employees, your first contract,
Mhm.
by statute is a probationary contract for the year, right? It's not 6 months, it's for the year. So it aligns all of our employee groups to a year.
I just want to say too, that one of the things that we're looking to do to provide more clarity as we hire or onboard new employees is to provide more clarity around the evaluation process.
Yeah.
So that it's not just when it's time, but when it's due.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we talk about this so much with instructional evaluation, because there's been so much law about it, tied to pay and all these
Correct.
things, that it really is, it shouldn't be a surprise. We should not be, we always have a problem when we get to April, May, and someone's, oh my gosh, wait, how do we not know this? That's a
Correct.
problem. That's always a
Mhm.
red flag to me, that something's wrong if we're getting to the end of a year and now we need to go to an evaluation review. I mean, if an employee should know, and there
Agreed.
should be no surprises. And so that's that communication. And I know Jessica Doherty does a great job with talking about feedback and, getting much feedback on the feedback. So we just want the same for our employees. So we'll talk. We hear the rationale, but we'll talk about it, because I think we're like kind of talking past each other. Like, we want the same thing, and how do we land there where it's like we're pointing out that to both of these points, it's
Right.
just, we'll just get through probation, and I just need someone to keep them around, to have a body, and then get rid of them. When if there truly is there is a path to success here,
Mhm.
whether it's 6 or 12 months or anytime. So
Okay.
gotcha.
Understood. All right.
Okay.
And of course, 10.1.2 before that,
Yes.
it's only if 12.1.1,
Understood.
that would go with it.
That makes
All right.
And I just want to reference, retention of employees is extremely important to us as
Yeah,
well. It's not,
absolutely.
we just want to get them in and then it's 6 months, because there's
Yeah.
a whole ramp up process, and that's why we're doing more standardization around expectations to leadership to say,
Yeah.
if you hire them, let's figure out how to retain them.
Yes.
Not let's just wait and hope, fingers crossed, but we actually take
Absolutely.
actionable steps.
Yeah, we absolutely agree and glad to hear that. Thank you.
All right, 15.3.8. So I'll read it in just a moment. This is overall looking to, we did several MOUs over the last few years with our instructional employees, right? So to ultimately, so that the transfer period wasn't like to like for those of us who have been around a long time, right? We knew the like to like. And we did some MOUs in an annual basis to the point where it was so successful, it's now in the contract language that the transfer period is not restricted to like to like. This is really a similar, in a similar vein, that during the transfer period, we want to allow employees, ESP employees, to transfer not like to like. So for example, trying to think of it. Okay, let's say secretary, and not every site has one, but let's say there's a loft and a secretary 2, but you have a secretary 1 opening during the transfer period, you're not able to transfer the secretary 2 into the secretary 1 because it's a change in pool category.
Right.
This would allow during that transfer period for that to happen if the principal wants it and if the employee wants to do it. Because obviously the employee in that case, it would be a decrease in pay, but we know some employees, they want to stay at their schools, or they want to stay at their child's school, or they want to stay in their neighborhood where they're close to, it's close to home. So this is what this is opening up for here. So the way that we propose to word it, and again, the current language is there in the black print. And then our proposed language was, once support allocations are confirmed with each site, a transfer period of 2 weeks will be established by the Division of Human Resources. Transfers for permanent ESP employees will be allowed within and between pool classifications / groups during this 2-week time period. At the conclusion of the support transfer period, new hires and transfers will remain frozen until pool placement needs have been met. And then you can see in red what we're proposing to strike is the current language that does not allow for moving between pool categories. And then in addition, we did it this past year with instructional through an MOU that, due to, obviously, we have vacancies and we want to be able to hire employees and we don't want to lose employees that are looking. So we are proposing that new hires may be hired during the support transfer period at the discretion of Human Resources with notification to CTA. The reason that we say at the discretion of Division of Human Resources is because there may be years where we don't have a lot of vacancies and we don't want to allow new hires if our employees need to be able to transfer into those positions. So it would only be in, 2025, where 10 years ago, it would not have been needed. So we would want to only allow new hires in situations where there are enough vacancies to support the number of unit losses. Did I say that right? Did I say it right? All right. Turning to the next page here, 17.15.1. Again, this is just to be consistent among employees, but then there's some other reasons here as well. Currently, our ESP employees can be granted a health leave of 6 months. They may extend that leave for up to 36 months. That's a long time. Obviously. And what we are proposing is that that is shortened to 18 months, meaning that they would have their first health leave of 6 months, but then they could only extend up to 18 additional months. There's not a financial impact necessarily when employees extend this way. It's because they are, if they're out of sick time, and I have a lot of sick time, but I don't have 3 years worth. Right. And when you cross a fiscal year after FMLA, you do not, your health insurance, you have to pay for it. So those things are already in the contract. Where the impact is on school leaders, that if that employee has rights to that position still, it's very difficult to fill with a temporary appointment because there's plenty of other permanent appointments. And what we feel that it does is it creates where that vacancy is never able to be filled, which we believe then puts more of a strain on the other employees at the site. So that's why we want to shorten it. We think that 2 years is still helping people get through their situation. And it does align with both the instructional and the HSEF contract. Instructional is worded a little different. Instructional, it says you can take a health leave, you can extend for a year, up to a year, and you can extend to another, you can extend for the same illness for up to another year. So again, it's more aligned to the 2-year timeframe.
I mean, in the last school year, or where we are now, to have like how many cases are we talking about?
I'll have to look. I don't have that data with me, but I can have HR pull that for us.
Yeah, maybe like this last year and the year prior.
Yeah.
maybe last
And we
year.
can look at how many employees have been on, ESP employees have been on
Yeah.
health leave for more than 12 months or more than
I think that would be
18 months.
helpful.
Yeah. Okay. All right, getting there. All right, 25.1.1. Terminal pay, and for those of you who don't know, terminal pay, I didn't know until I was in HR, is when you retire, that's your sick leave that's being paid out when you retire. Okay, I was called it sick leave payout until I was, and then realized, oh, that's what terminal pay is. So if you didn't know, that's what terminal pay is. So the current language is in the black font there, and then the blue is what we are proposing to add. This is our current practice. And we just want it to be clear for all employees. This is exact language is from the HSEF contract. Okay. All right. 17.2.3, job abandonment. This here, and for transparency, this is direct language from the HSEF contract. If an employee fails to report for regularly assigned duty 3 consecutive days without notifying his or her immediate supervisor of the reason for the absence, they shall be determined to abandon their position and shall be terminated. It is understood that an exception to this provision shall be made for documented incapacitation resulting from an illness or accident which made such notification impossible. This is really, for lack of, this is a word that's been out in the media, right? Quiet quitting, right? People just, they stop coming to work and you reach out to them, and they just don't answer their phone. You know, they don't answer their calls. We call their emergency contact, no one answers. They basically have decided they don't want to work for the district anymore. We see it a lot after the summer, coming back to the new school year. And what it's creating with the HSEF contract, and we've never had a situation where we terminated someone and then they shouldn't have been, right? We've always worked with them if they were, obviously if they're under FMLA or they had a reason, like we said, we're trying to retain employees. But by not having this language in the ESP contract, what we're finding is we then have to go through progressive discipline. We send a letter, then 2 weeks later, we have a process, and it creates a vacancy at that site for an extended period of time, needing to go through that process. When the employee, they just don't feel a need to send in their resignation form. You know, they might have a job, all different situations. So in this, we are proposing that we do the same language as we've done in HSEF, which has been much more successful for us backfilling those positions. Right. Okay. And then if you go at 13.1.1, this would just add job abandonment as a reason for reprimand, demotion, suspension, or termination. Right.
Good job.
Thanks. I know it's a lot.
No, it's good. It's
A lot to get through all that. Yeah.
well, I think we, for the homework on language, the ball's in our court.
It is.
So, since we're like 15 minutes from the break, I mean, my thought is just to caucus basically till 3:30.
Sounds good.
And then, move into our budget portion, which will allow our instructional folks to get here.
Okay.
I don't think we're in 15, I just don't see us in 5 minutes turning around and coming back and trying to get something done in 10. So
We got a lot of information.
did.
I mean, we have a
Absolutely.
huge stack of things that have been TA'd, so that's progress.
no, we did make good progress today. So I appreciate the effort and, walking through the things where maybe we can still work on them and then we've got the things that, I mean, not, even though there was sign of no's, but let's work on. it.
Yeah.
So,
No, that was good.
and then we're looking at what you proposed and,
Okay.
You want to talk to these?
Yeah.
We wanna do that after
Yeah, I think that-
presentation.
You want to
um,
look at dates?
yeah, let's look at dates in these next 15 minutes.
Perfect.
We know we'll definitely need to come back for it, yes.
Hope that I auto connect to you guys.
Yeah,
Like I work.
yeah. Okay. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty open. I have no trips planned.
All right.
I figured I'd be bargaining all summer, so, I'm pretty flexible, but I know that it's difficult with
Mhm.
a lot of schedules, so I don't know if you all, I know there was maybe a little bit of conversation if you guys had some proposed dates just based on your team. Or are we looking, like as early as next week or the second week of July?
Mhm.
Second week.
Okay.
Are we
have a
looking-
workshop canceled.
I'm not here, but we had talked about the fact, like, we know summer is unique, right? And we are
Yeah.
all motivated to continue to work through this process.
Right,
So if one of us isn't here, then we feel like we have a team on both sides that can pick up,
Agreed.
for each other.
So look at the week of July 7th.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
what I'm
That would
thinking
be
too.
good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open the 7th, I'm open the 8th. I'm trying to look here.
Mhm.
Not
Eighth,
the-
we have a board meeting.
Okay, not the 8th, so we got the 7th, the,
7th or the 9th,
or the 9th,
kind of.
or the 10th.
If we look at 7th or 9th, I think that's,
Seventh
okay.
cabinet.
Oh, that's Kevin's. Okay.
So the 9th.
Hey, 9th. 9th, okay. And are we thinking, you ready to
I
put
think,
together instructional
think-
as well?
I think by the 9th, so, let me just look.
I would recommend doing ESPs, finishing up the language and getting that. on the
Yeah.
9th.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
my,
Following week would get.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I think the 9th would be, allow us to come with, because you are gonna do a budget presentation, we'll ask some questions, we're looking at things.
Yeah.
I think the 9th would be a good day to come back with language and then give our,
Yep. That would be great.
start bargaining.
Okay.
We do have actually some initial just compensation pieces, not the full scale yet,
Mhm.
just because, we wanted to hear what the impact was. So let's schedule the 9th as an ESP day
Okay,
for language and money.
that sounds great. So
And,
July 9th,
I don't know,
at-
where's time?
8:30 a.m.
How about we start at 9 and you guys
Okay.
are welcome to come
Perfect.
any, 8:30.
That sounds good. We'll start there.
And then we'll just schedule the whole day and see where we can go.
So ESP. All right.
Yes,
So is
July
the
9th.
building open, or do you want us to host?
You guys good? Yeah.
All right.
What?
Yeah, I can't be there, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
on that 9th.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so. I'm putting it in my calendar, so it's there. All right, so we have the 9th, and then the following week, like the week of the 14th,
Mhm.
we can schedule an instructional day. Let's see.
15th.
Yeah, there's nothing on the calendar on the 15th here, so I
Okay.
think that would be a good day.
Same time?
Yep, let's just,
Yep.
9 a.m.
Yep.
Yeah, so the 15th at, we'll say 9 a.m.
Yep.
Again, we open at 8, so.
Yep.
Want to get set up.
Okay. I feel good that we have dates so
Yeah.
that continue moving forward.
Yeah, and I know, we'll have discussions and
Mhm.
even if, we want to schedule a few more. I mean, I know the next couple weeks we'll be able to get a better picture, but that I think gives us good room then to, even when we meet with the instructional, there's something, we'll communicate if we think, hey, we can do a quick hour with ESPs or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we have those 2 dates.
Yep, I just think that helps because calendars fill up super quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So that helps us to hold those dates for that. Okay,
So July 9 and July 15th.
perfect.
All right.
All
So
right.
we will pause or caucus
Yes.
till 3:30. Yes,
Yes.
we can stop recording. So I just want to restate what I said at the start of the ESPs, that now that we've included our HCTA instructional bargaining team. Before I kind of restate what I said, I think it would be good to kind of introduce those who weren't present at our last session. We'll see everybody again on the 9th and the 15th. So why don't we start with our instructional team who's here that wasn't here last time. I think we'll start with your next to Tamika. Yeah,
Kim.
What about Michelle?
yeah, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Miller. I work at Health River Club, been a member of the team for a while. Nice to see you all. Hi, I'm Kimberly Coleman. I'm a DRT for Chief of Schools. We've been on the team for 5 months.
Let's just do it.
Just-
Go for it, go for it.
Tamika with HCTA Financial.
Rob Creek, president here at HCTA.
Virginia Gambrell, Vice President of CTA.
Bert Wegman, Executive Director, Chief Negotiator for HCTA.
Valerie Tuchman, Secretary Treasurer, HCTA.
Kathy Butler, bookkeeper, Barrington Middle School. Jensen Solsher, the teacher at Head Start. Catherine Jones, behavior specialist, for ESP, para. At Burns Middle School, and I'm the building director.
I'm Olivia Gosauer. I'm Secretary at 1 at Tampa Bay.
Roger Marcellus, and the elementary media specialist.
Dickinson, reading resource at Cypress Creek.
Yes. High school.
President, teacher at Kingsbury High School.
Deborah Blackwell Owens, the teacher at Kennedy Exception Center. Jody Orlando, school social. Anita Greenmount, school psychologist at Lewis, and he's at Pavey. Leslie Adams, speech language pathologist at York PA. Sabrina Bride, bookkeeper at Washington. Renee Bowser, Folsom Elementary media specialist.
Urshire School Counselor at Washington Next. Mitchell, automotive instructor or
All right, I think that's team, right?
So,
All right. Would your team like to introduce yourselves to
Sure.
our new folks? that are here? Go for
Absolutely,
it.
absolutely. All right. Good. Susan.
Susan.
Hi, Soy Lola Hare,
Thanks.
Tracy Schatzberg, Human Resources and Cleveland. Sean Patton, Resources, Chief of Resource Officer.
Kelly King, General Manager of Employee Relations.
Danielle Shotwell, Chief Negotiator.
Jamie Lewis, CFO.
He gives it Scott Bryan, school plant food. At this time, until Caesar
Tanya Arja, communications. Executive Secretary Kelly King.
Hey, all right, everybody's back. So, again, I just want to say that we appreciate, back here re-engaging in bargaining. And like I said, with the ESP group, we've had a shared desire as both HCTA and HCPS to do what we've done the last couple of years, settle before the school year starts. My first year here after, we had an impasse a couple of years ago, we were able to get our settlement done before the fall and the winter break, which was, a new thing, unprecedented. And then last year we were able to actually settle before the start of the school year, which was definitely a priority of our superintendent and what HCTA had brought during those discussions. And we shared that same goal for this coming 25-26 school year. I mean, we were, like I said in the first group, we were talking about bargaining in, December, January, February, and we knew it was a little bit of a later session, a legislative session. But unfortunately, the legislature did not do what they were supposed to do. The only thing that they're supposed to do, legally required to do during legislative session is pass a budget. And it took them 6 weeks beyond that time, which has delayed not only Hillsborough, but many districts across the state. And we recognize that today, we may not be at a spot yet because the budget, I don't even know if it's been signed yet. I mean, we're looking at that initial, the initial look at the conference report. So, we're here trying to look at it and figure out what we can do and come up with compensation proposals. So we're anxious for what we're going to see today in the presentation, to get the information, be able to ask questions like we've done the last couple of years since I've been here. Our members, and you all know, our staff of the district that are really navigating uncertain times with their finances. I mean, cost of living is rising. There are real anxieties about wages and staffing. I know we talk about this a lot, staffing and of course benefits, what we're seeing, not just here in Hillsborough, but across the state and the nation. And, Rob and Regina have talked about this a lot, that Florida being 50th in the nation in average teacher pay is not just about teachers, that impacts everybody in our schools. So we're excited to engage today. We'll be listening and asking questions. And we may not have a settlement when we walk out today, but we will definitely, I believe we'll have a little bit of a clearer picture. So we're just excited to have this opportunity and understand about this initial look at the FEFP. We talked about a little bit in caucus with our team that the FEFP has changed a lot over the last couple of years due to family empowerment scholarships. And we could just kind of look at like, oh, look, that's how many students are being estimated to come to the district. It's now expanding thanks to, I don't say thanks in a good way, say detrimentally, the expansion of universal vouchers, which has, shows that the legislature brags about, look at how many extra hundreds of millions of dollars we're putting into public schools, into the state budget, but that money is not coming to our public schools. It's going to private schools, home schools, and it's difficult to navigate when we look at the FEFP now. There are new pages that, what does this mean? So we're excited for Mr. Lewis to teach us what it all means to the best of his ability with the changes. So we'll pass it over to you. I think everything should be hooked up for you to be able to click through it and use your teacher voice.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity that Hillsborough can come and talk to you a little bit. You said it very well. I think it's a unique year. I guess I drew the lucky straw in my first year here. They decided to postpone the budget process. So, but no, there was a delay in that. And so there's really two challenges. And I want you to remember these two things we go through the presentation because they're active challenges for us. So the first one is really something that impacts this year, and we'll talk more about it, is our fourth calculation. If you remember, or maybe you don't or are aware, the third calculation was actually significantly delayed. And so we got that really late. And there was some challenges for Hillsborough regarding the third calculation. And that's kind of, think of calculations as our paychecks. And then the fourth calculation, which is supposed to be out in April, we still haven't received that yet. And so you'll see in a minute, hopefully, we tried to use the presentation to explain why those are so important and why it's an unknown of how that could impact us financially. And the second part is, as it was mentioned, there is a budget that has been submitted to the governor. To all we know right now, it hasn't been approved yet. It is still under review. We know that the basics in terms of it, and so we're working off of that. But until something's official, then we really don't have those final numbers. And we think they're close, but as we've seen in the past, nothing's official until it's official. And so as we deal with that, this is a very unique situation. I think that's why you'll hear in a minute, our fund balance is really important because it allows us to overcome these challenges and allows us to manage through uncertainties or changes that we have. And that really leads us into the start of our presentation. Well, this worked a minute ago.
There you go.
There we go. And what we wanted to go over first is, well, how does the district get paid? And we think that's really important because of the recent challenges that we saw with that. And so I apologize, it's something you've already heard, but I think it's a good refresher. Definitely helpful for me because of just getting to the district and how we're funded, which is a little bit different than higher education where I came from. And so the Florida Department of Education uses a tool of surveys to help understand where you're at with your students. And the one thing that is misunderstood with the surveys is it's not really about enrollments. It's about your FTE or your full-time equivalent, which considers enrollment, but it's always not a one-for-one. And I think as we see the movement toward a virtual school and other avenues that our students can take, it's not a guarantee, especially in our high school areas, that we get a 1 FTE for every student, because we have to share that cost if they're sharing between different areas. So I think one good example is if they're taking a Florida virtual school and attending one of our high schools, we don't get all the money for that student here at Hillsborough. We split that revenue between those two different groups. And so we have these surveys, and the real interesting part of our surveys is it actually kind of overlaps 3 different fiscal years and how it works. And so the first one comes, and I'm just going to use this year as examples. The first one happens in the spring. So our spring just happened, and that's where we have our initial projections. Inside those projections, we're trying to pull all our data and work with the state about where do we think we're going to be at. And of course, they have a lot more data at the state level that's showing trends and national growth patterns and all that, and they factor that in. And that happens during the spring. Over the summer, they kind of relook at that and tweak it a little bit, and then we go into a season of different actual surveys that are happening. That's taking actual head count, physical counts of our students, and then calculating that from a full-time equivalent. And then after all of that, the following fiscal year, so the following October, they have a final count. And that's kind of capturing our summer months. And so if you kind of look at it, that happens over 3 different fiscal years. It happens in the spring prior, and then the actual year, and then the following fall, it's still ongoing. And that's important because calculations are tied to each of those. And so our calculations in a way is like our paydays. That's when the district is paid. And so there's 5 different calculations. 4 that happen during the actual fiscal year, and 1 that happens the year after that year ends. And so each of those takes either a projection or actuals and kind of recalculates the amount that the district gets each of those times. As we all know, our enrollment can fluctuate during the year, but there's also other things that account for that. And I'll give you a really good example. Our Hillsborough virtual school, those kids, those students are funded after they complete the course and pass the course. Well, sometimes that doesn't happen until certain parts of the year. And so the enrollment for FTE for those students don't get calculated into our kind of paycheck until they complete and pass the course. And so you see that happen a lot toward the end of the year, because that's when a lot of our course completions are done. And that's going to be a big emphasis for the district as we move forward. But we just wanted to explain how the surveys relate to each of the calculations. Now, back in the 3rd calculation, one of our challenges is that some adjustments were made. And so there's really 2 things that happened during our 3rd calculation. One of that was our FTE was a little bit lower than we predicted. Now, that could be okay because, again, enrollment fluctuates. So $9.3 million was removed out of our 3rd calculation budget because of enrollment changes. Again, just to emphasize, that could rebound itself. That money could return in the 4th calculation because our enrollment could have went back up. The bigger change was 2 adjustments that were made that directly impacted us. One was prior year adjustment. And so if you remember a few minutes ago, there's a survey that happens after the fiscal year ends. Well, eventually a calculation will account for that plus or minus and whatever that survey resulted in. And so a little over $2 million was adjusted out of our budget this year because of that. And that's just out of our control. That's the direct results. It's a lag measure. It's something that happens way after the fact, but it just eventually catches up to you. The other one that happened was about $6.97 million was adjusted, and that was from millage compression and a state adjustment, or just state adjustment overall. And that was related to a lot of things that we won't spend time here talking about, but a lot of that was because the state needed to make some adjustments from a budgetary standpoint for the overall state of Florida, and every district was adjusted down. And so why is that a challenge? Well, we start the year planning as if we're going to have so many students. And we know what funding we're going to have because of what the budget said and the BSA and all the measures and info that we know. But they had to make this adjustment, which we never expected. And so add all that together. And so about $18.3 million was adjusted in our third calc that we had to try to overcome. And we're working on that. But you'll see in a minute of how that directly impacts our general fund balance. As we start looking toward next year, we start factoring all these things in. Is what are we seeing? What's happening? One of the things that we do look at is our FTE trends, and we presented this to the principal group a few weeks ago, and we just wanted to bring attention that Hillsborough is looking at about 178,000 students for next year. And again, I want to emphasize this is our FTE. I should probably emphasize that this is our FTE, not headcount. So this isn't the total number of students we have. This is our full-time equivalent number of students. And so right now we're a little over 178,000. That's what's projected based off of our data. And we just wanted to, as we look at this and see, well, what has been our trend? Where have we moved on from the last 5 years or 3 years in looking at our data? Well, 5 years ago, we were at a little over 181,000. And so if you look at that between our 5-year trend, we're down about almost 3,000 students, 2,800 students. If you look at our 3-year trend, we were at 183,916 FTE 3 years ago. If you look at that, when what's projected for next year, we're down about 5,400 students. Again, FTE. And why is that important? That's how we get reimbursed. That's how we get paid based off our student counts. And so that's one area that as you start to hear some of the challenge we have financially, that's one of our challenges is we have less students. In addition to that, we wanted to talk about, well, what is the primary driver for our revenue? And so it's going to be based off our FTE, and it's going to be based off of the BSA or a basic student allocation. That's our primary driver of how they calculate how much money the district is going to get. And one of the things that we're beginning to we have tracked, and we're going to make sure we really look at this is, well, what has been our trend? Because that allows us to remember what we were able to do in years past because of what the funding sources were, and then based on what they approve, what we can or we have challenges doing. And so if you look at this over a 5-year period, the recommended BSA that is to the governor's desk to be approved is a 0.78% increase, so roughly $41.62 per FTE. The challenge for that, as we think about some of the decisions that we have or opportunities that we can do, is that's a 5-year low. And again, there's other things that are inside these numbers. So you might say, well, why did we have a 12% increase back in 23-24? There's a lot more tied into that, but you can kind of just see history-wise of how things kind of ebb and flowed throughout the years. Well, at a 0.78% increase, that is significantly lower than we've seen the last couple of years. And so the increase in funding that we have is just not going to be there compared to other years. And so as we think about how minimum wage is increasing or things that we want to do and trying to keep up with inflation and things to that nature, a 0.78% really doesn't allow us to do a lot of those things unless we want to look at some other means of funding that. Another way to look at this is, well, at a 0.78% increase at $178,000, well, how much extra money would that be? It's only about $7 million, $7.5 million. And so you kind of think about how less students that are predicted and the BSA really isn't a significant or almost no increase. What does that mean from a financial standpoint? At the last board meeting, we had our May budget amendment, and the one thing that we're emphasizing is that fund balance was something that helps us to overcome some of these challenges. Beginning of the year, we had budgeted for $183 million fund balance to end the year with. Through the third calculation, which happened back in March, we had to figure out a way right now to help overcome that challenge of the third calculation and them removing the $18 million that we just talked about. And so you'll notice where we started the year at $183 million. Right now, we're projected to be $266 million at the end of the fiscal year. And most of that change is weighted to the third count. And so the reason we wanted to bring this up is because that fund balance allows us to overcome these unexpected challenges that we have. The other big challenge that we had this year, which a lot of us had personally too, was the hurricanes during the fall. And so our operating fund, the general fund, was able to take care of most of those challenges for the district in working with our ops team. And we're hoping to get FEMA reimbursements for those, but that takes about 2 to 3 years for those reimbursements to come in. But we were able to take care of all of that because of our general fund reserve. And so that allowed us to overcome those challenges. The other thing we wanted to mention was, well, we're hearing all this and we know we have a significant fund balance, but what does all that really mean? One of the things that the fund balance helps us do is manage the cash flow of the district also. And our cash flow really follows kind of, I call it the roller coaster of our fund balance. And so you see on this slide, how does our fund balance react to different times of the season? One thing that education is really good about is our funding sources, our revenue income is fixed to only certain parts of the year. And we don't have that continuous revenue flow that a big company like Walmart or Target or something like that would have that constant money coming through. We're kind of fixed in different seasons. Our biggest one happens between November and February, where the tax collector collects all their funds and that money comes to us. And so if you look at this scale, we always start out high. Our low point will always be during the fall because that we're kind of in between those funding periods. And you notice in January, kind of where we peak, like really where the high point we have, and that's directly related to our collections that we partner with and get from the tax collector. And so, and then we live off that high for a while, and then we kind of recuperate during the summer. And so our fund balance at a high level allows us to kind of deal with that ups and down and doesn't make or force the district to have to borrow money, which we haven't done, I think, in a long time, but it allows us to overcome that. And that's something we have to monitor from a cash flow standpoint is how are we able to react to different things? One of the things that we're very excited about this year, and we know we've already mentioned that, and the superintendent was able to announce that yesterday, is the millage referendum that will be starting next year. Like I said, the district is really excited along with all you that we're able to get to this point. It's something that's really good for our people and we're excited for it. I'll not fail to mention the great work our payroll team did at Hillsborough to overcome this. If I learned anything, our payroll is a little complicated. And so it was a heavy lift for them to be able to do this with all the different pay groups that we have and the different types of employment. And I'm really proud to say they overcame all of that and the testing was successful and we're ready to go. And that's important because that means we can start this on the first day of the new fiscal year or whenever their contracts will begin next year. Going back to our fund balance real quick, one of the challenges that we do have to consider for next year is because we want to start this in July, the revenue for this to help pay this bill doesn't start to come in until November. And really, most people don't pay their taxes or your mortgage company doesn't pay your taxes until the bitter end. I wish they would do a little earlier, but they wait to the very end. And that's usually be somewhere between December and January is when they send those payments. And so as we think about our fund balance, one of the things that we have to overcome for the fall, which we do have a plan for this, is to how do we overcome and pay for the millage until the funding does come in for that payment. And we do, and our fund balance is going to allow us to do that. But again, we just wanted to, we couldn't do a financial update without mentioning this really good news for our people and the excitement we have for it to start in just a week or so. Beyond that, the things that we do know this year are, the theme is really we have some challenges financially. And I'll just take a few minutes to talk about each of those and about how that could impact us. As we mentioned earlier, our funding from the Department of Education is going to be impacted for primarily two reasons, as we talked about a few slides ago. One, our enrollment is projected to be down. And again, I want to emphasize that is a projection. It's not where hopefully will end. That is a projection, but that's the numbers we have to go off right now. And the BSA is we had hoped that it would be a little bit higher, and it wasn't. And so that's something we have to overcome, is that the revenue income that we've been used to and the increases are just not the same as they were in previous years. Another piece of good news, but an expense that we have to overcome, is the Florida retirement system has increased their rates going into next year. That's really good for our employees, but obviously a cost to the district. And so that's estimated at $5 million. And so that's going to benefit. But again, that's something we have to overcome when we don't have a lot of influx of new dollars coming in. And how do we deal with that challenge? Our other thing that's a challenge for us is our healthcare costs. Nationally, this is something that's not unique to Hillsborough. It's just, unfortunately, the nature of what's going on in the world right now. And this is an increased cost, and it seems like it's happening every year. And I think most of us that deal with that really know that. And so it's a $25 million increase to the budget for this coming year. The thing you got to think about is that's only for half a year of cost, because remember, our plans don't renew in January. So on the finance team, and we have Miss Danielle with us, I had to make sure I mentioned that, is really thinking about, that's a $50 million challenge that we have to overcome. Only $25 million for this coming year, but the increase was $50 million, and that was the price of the health insurance coming in. So again, I just want to emphasize, next year's budget will only take on half of that increase, but we have to begin planning of how to deal with it the following year, because it is a real cost that is here that is unavoidable. It's a cost that we have to overcome. The other thing that we are also excited about, but comes with a cost, is moving over to self-funding. Our HR team has done a great job of leading us down to this path, and that's going to be something that we're able to be more active in. But with self-funding, it requires, think of it as a deposit or a reserve of $48 million to be accountable for that. And so that's something that our general fund reserve is able to do at this point. It provides the power to the district to be able to make and manage our plans. And so that comes at a little bit of a cost. Moving down our list of property taxes, we haven't got the certified property tax roll yet from the office, but we do have preliminary numbers. And to kind of sum it up, really the property taxes are kind of staying flat for next year. Obviously, we'll get additional dollars from the millage, but that's reserved only for the millage. But overall, right now, they're predicting that our property taxes are about flat. And so again, no additional revenue. To give you some context there, for us who lived in Hillsborough for a long time, if you've owned a house, congratulations, your value has increased a lot over the last couple of years. If you're looking for a house, I'm really sorry that increases have happened. But as you think about that from a personal standpoint, we have also benefited from that from a district standpoint. Is property taxes our values have increased about 3% over the last couple of years. And so we have benefited directly from that increase in taxes because we get more money. At a flat tax, or kind of thinking the values are about the same, that's again, no more funding coming into the district. It's not increased funding where we've been kind of living off of an increase before. So again, just like the BSA, not an influx of new dollars there. As mentioned earlier, and thank you for mentioning that, one of our biggest challenges is we have two significant groups in Hillsborough that attract students, and that's our charter schools and that's our FES, our Florida Empowerment Scholarship. And those two things that we have to monitor. And the Florida Empowerment Scholarship, since they changed into kind of opening up to all families, has really seen a significant growth rate in Hillsborough alone. To give you some context for that, 3 years ago, their FTE was roughly around 8,600 students. Next year, they are projected to be closer to 23,000 students. And so the emphasis here is that is not a direct one-for-one take from Hillsborough County Schools, because there's other things like homeschool groups and private groups that are involved in that. But it's definitely something that is attracting potential students away from Hillsborough. And so that's maybe one of the many reasons of why you saw a slight dip in our enrollment. But to our point earlier, the funding has to come from somewhere. And that's where we start seeing some shifts at the legislative level in Tallahassee. And then finally, is all of us have experienced on a personal level, inflation, tariffs, gas pumps, and utility costs. As much as we don't like it, those bills, we've seen them rise over the last couple of years, especially recently. And that's something that the district won't be they won't be, they can't avoid. And so we're something we're having to try to track. I tell you, the challenge with those three areas is it's real time and it's ever changing. And so as things happen in the world or things happen inside the United States, they can directly impact those type of areas. And so our best planning, it could be a really good plan, but something in the world could be happening, or something locally could be happening. And in 3 months, that plan could be really adjusted because of those things that are moving. So that's always a moving target for us. And that's something we work closely with our operation teams is try to identify that. So in summary, we just kind of wanted to show you a landscape of how some things work, what we're seeing, especially as we look at our history and our trends. But really the focus is to navigate very carefully over this year. And all information we're getting is this year's a challenge. The next couple of years could be even bigger challenges for us, and start navigating that and preparing for how you might overcome that. We have other things that attract our students in our district. And so that's something we have to be mindful for. And so as we see their growth, again, not a direct one-for-one, but it does impact us. But at the end of the day, serving our students and our employees are important. And so that's something that will always be important, but challenges don't help them. And so this is our presentation, and we'll be glad for any questions.
Well, thank you, Lewis. I think that was good to kind of talk through how the funding works. I think, we've been trying to over after our last session, and we kind of knew that the budget was going to be slow, trying to educate folks on how the funding works, right? We've talked about this here, that we don't have the ability to generate revenue, right? Unless students come, and then that funding is increased. So I have a lot of questions, and some of these may seem, well, we've kind of talked about it, but it's for clarity, and some of them we may not know just because it changes to the FEFP. So I'm going to kind of work through them, and then some people have passed some questions, and I'll try to get to those. So I guess leading off, we're back now because final conference report came out, right? We have a snapshot of the budget. So, and we know we only have the third calculation, we don't have the fourth yet. When you're looking at that, how does that final FEF or the final conference report compare to what was reported in the third, where we know you talked about some of those things? I think what we're always looking at what's new, right? What's the new money? I know you kind of mentioned 7 million. Is that what you're kind of saying is the hard number now, or?
So yes and no. That's the BSA portion. Again, that's a very rough number as an estimate.
Yep.
Okay. That's our main driver from a revenue standpoint. That isn't the only change that's happened in Tallahassee. There's a lot more. All the other ones are much less significant from a total impact from us. But and we have focused mostly on the general fund in this presentation and conversation. Obviously, there's challenges being looked at from our Title I areas and other areas like that. Operations are dealing with some challenges, but the BSA is the primary driver of our revenue, in my opinion, for our district, and the easiest one that's a direct connection to each FTE or each student. And so that doesn't exclude other challenges, but that's our most significant one. The one that we are able, in the operation, the general fund budget, able to make the most significant changes with what we want to do.
I know in slide 4, we were talking about the FTE numbers. I think what we're trying to wrap our head around too, I think there was a chart there where we were showing all the different numbers, right? What we're trying to really dig down on is what is that actual change in per pupil funding from 24, 25, 25, 26. I know you highlighted about $41, but and then we see, I think what we're trying to get at is, so we've seen a decline in students over the last couple of years, but we're seeing it kind of creep back up. We see a little bit of an increase from the year prior, what's estimated to come up, but we also have a slight increase in the BSA. So what we're trying to, again, what is that actual change? I know you've got it kind of estimated there. Is it 850? Is it 1,000?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to answer that
Okay.
here. I would say just with the budget just coming out, that's stuff that we're still digging into. I think that the primary thing you can think about is the projection for next year is looking at a slight increase from what our third calculation resulted in. Now, again, I want to emphasize the third calc could have been naturally a little bit lower because of the time of season. I think our Hillsborough virtual completions are a good example of that, which is why the fourth calculation is so important.
Right.
Because they give us a better viewpoint on that. I have to believe that the full calculation would influence the conference report because it would have been out normally a lot earlier. That's another data point that they would not have had as they look at that. And so that's something they have to closely monitor the next couple of months.
Right. Like, because I think some of these questions will be, very detailed where we'll want to go back and
Yeah,
research and be
for
able
sure.
to possibly still answer them.
Well,
That we might
absolutely.
not have the number off the top of our head, but we
Yeah.
can calculate it.
I have this in a document and I'll,
Perfect.
you know.
Then I'll stop writing on my
No, it's
post-it
okay.
note.
I will definitely share with you. And I also, on that slide 4, I noted there was like a huge drop from the 23-24 school year to the 24-25 school year. What happened there? Do we know specifically?
Which
was just-
slide?
This is on slide 4. When you looked at the 23-24, that really high blue bar, and then to 24-25, it dropped pretty significantly. Do we know what was going on that year for that to happen? I mean, I know
Again,
you're new, but
yeah.
maybe anybody?
Again, I think that's something that the fourth calculation would have provided a better picture of that. Remember, that's a point in our season, really early in the process of what that would result in. I think the fourth calculation, when it's released and we don't have a time set for that, that would have given us some better insight for that. But it's something we are monitoring.
Okay, yeah, because I was just, and maybe I misunderstood that particular, I'm looking over at your chart there. I maybe misunderstood that slide. I thought it was just showing general enrollment year over year, but is that comparing
Yes.
calculations to each year?
Yes, so
Okay.
yeah, the calculations for each year, right?
Okay.
And so the third calc was down.
Mhm.
We think that hopefully it can rebound, but again, that's something we're gonna continue to
Okay.
monitor.
Very good. So some of the new funding, I know we talk about the BSA, and this may seem like a low level question, but just to help, how much of that new funding is tied to categoricals? I know that in the last couple of years, there's talk and change in legislation, right? That says, oh, now it's not so restricted to categorical, but we still have to pay categoricals. So when we look at that new funding, about $40 in the BSA, do we have an idea right now of how much of that is going to come out of the BSA to categoricals, or are categoricals covered out of the rest of the whole, the rest of the per student funding increase?
That's a very good question that we're still digging into.
Okay.
I don't know if we have the in-depth answer that you're hoping for right now,
Okay.
but it is something that they're continuing to change at the state level. And I think that's a really good point that you make. It's something we have to really take into account when we look at these history trends, is it's not always black and white. And so, for example, the BSA, where we saw a 12% increase a couple of years ago, categoricals were a major part of that. And so it does, that's the only unfortunate when you look at this history, is that it's not a 1-for-1 apples for apples. There's a lot more to account for there.
Yeah.
But it does represent how they're changing their funding outlook or their
Right.
funding mechanisms.
Yeah.
And that's something they really keep a hold of and track.
Yeah, they're trying, but they say the things and then don't actually do the thing. All right, I'm gonna kind of go to, so we know we don't have the fourth calculation out yet. And you may not, again, be able to answer this, but how much of a change do you expect between that fourth calculation and this final conference report? We know, and you reviewed this, we know that you and the superintendent did report that loss of revenue. We got the third calc, but we're expecting, to kind of bounce back. That was what we heard, enrollment. So when that happens, are you expecting, because I know you said you see, it's a little bit more in the conference report compared to the third calc. So what are you expecting, I guess, is the question there. Or comparing the fourth to the final.
Because of the results of the third calculation, I don't know if we know or are confident know, and the significant delay, we're unsure of what that result. What we do know is that are, the hope would always be for enrollment to grow. I think that's always our goal.
Yeah.
I think as we look at this, it's something that we have to closely monitor. I think there's things that we wanted to emphasize in the third calculation. There's a lot of it that was out of our control.
Right.
It happened to all districts. Unfortunately, larger districts were hit a little bit harder because of the sheer volume. But that's the looming question.
Yeah.
That's why the fourth calc is very important, is because it tells a big part of us.
Right, yeah. And I think, because that is, you know, we know that conference report is an estimate, but we here on the ground should be able to know that. I mean, the estimating fact, the way they estimate, I mean, it's interesting, because when you look over time, like, estimates are usually not always accurate, right? But we know, so that's why, you know, a lot of these questions are kind of leading into, if the FEFP is projecting a loss or a gain, how confident are we? Are we, we're 50% confident, we're 100% confident, or we're, you know, 150% confident that's not gonna happen, we're not gonna lose students. Because we've seen that often in Hillsborough, that the FEFP is reporting, we're gonna lose 2,000 students, we're gonna lose, but we know on the ground here that can't be, you know, it is a preparation, like we said, they're responding and preparing for vouchers. So, I don't know if there's a question in there, but that's where all these are kind of leading to. What do we really expect and know? Because we know that you're working on the budget now. You have to, right? Because you still have, even though the legislature was late, you still got to turn in your work.
Right.
So, yeah, that's that, I guess. So I guess talking about budget, you know, now that we have this projection for 25-26, for everyone here to kind of understand the budget process, where are you right now in finalizing that budget, and when will that be out for the board to approve, and just the timeline there?
So I want to make sure Miss Susan and Miss Danielle, make sure I have these dates right.
All right, we're ready.
So the meeting on the 8th to the board.
July 8th?
July 8th.
Okay.
And so that's our challenge, right? That's so quick.
Yeah.
And really, we don't have an official budget yet. So it's very challenging.
Yeah.
So the 8th, the package will be submitted as a very preliminary budget. Again, a lot of unknowns at that point. And I think many districts are still trying to uncover, the legislative items are very thick and a lot of stuff to go through. So it's not something that you can react to very quickly. And so on the 8th, very preliminary budget will go forth. We're mandated by governments to have certain things out at certain dates, and so we can't go past the 8th, and so that's one of our challenges. And then toward the end of the month, and I don't know the date, July 29th is our first hearing, and then our final hearing is
now you're September
So,
8th.
September 8th. So those are our official dates.
When is the summary budget due to the legislature, or due to the DOE, sorry?
I'm sorry.
When is the district summary budget, when is that due to the DOE?
Actually, 3 days.
Okay.
September.
3 days. So
Okay, perfect. No, that's helpful. It's good for everybody to kind of understand that, because I loved your like pie chart cycle. So this is helpful too, to understand the process.
And it's such a fluid process.
Yeah.
As, as we get adjusted,
Mhm.
obviously, we have to adjust the budget. So that's why there's budget amendments, obviously, that go throughout the year. We have to do that because our revenue's changing.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, that's why there's monthly budget amendments that are always kind of based on, what did we say we were gonna do in that first snapshot, and then we track it as we go, and then it's all leading up to that annual financial report. So that's the second part of the question, is the annual financial report for 24-25, when will that be completed, available? So the budget is due and the annual financial report are due the same date? Perfect. Mhm. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, legislature. All right, so kind of moving on, we talked about the millage, and I know that we're excited about the work that we did. out of HCTA in conjunction with, you know, in partnership with the district and our community partners, and it's good to talk about that and know that we've got that, and that's a separate, part, right? And
Yep.
the communication went out. So I think it's important to just really clarify that are the millage funds being counted separately in the budget projections? Or are they being pooled in general, right? I think that's important for employees to know. I think we've done a lot of communication out, but I think it's important here to understand that. Why we talked about it, it's part of the budget. Are we talking about this in whole, like that's gonna be there, or is it truly gonna be looked at separately?
I mean, obviously it's part of the general fund, but
Right.
it is gonna be a protected account. If that's what you're asking.
Yes,
Those funds, those revenues are for a certain purpose. And so it will be used for that purpose, and the district will be working with the Citizens Oversight Committee and reviewing that, and it will be, but separated from all the funds.
right, yeah. And I think it's important to just reiterate here, you know, last year when we were in bargaining, we were very intentional about keeping that negotiation of those funds separate from what we're doing at this table. And the same would be for this coming school year, that what we're doing here at this table is above and beyond and is much needed, because we know that we needed the millage desperately to supplement, to get our wages where they, you know, they need to be, but they technically aren't there, right? So I think it's important that we continue to like be mindful of that and state that here, that just because we have the millage does not stop what we need to do for base salaries. We're so thankful that we have that and that the voters passed that, but we can't just let that stop, right? It's kind of like the intent of the teacher salary increase allocation of raising starting pay, great, but that created a whole set of problems, which is why we are where we are. So thank you for being clear that yes, it's part of the whole budget, but it is being protected for that purpose and will not just be, I mean, our position, and I think the superintendent and school board agree that it's not then just, well, you got that, so you're good. We've got to keep working. So moving on kind of to the fund balance, and my notes showed, you know, I looked at the presentation back in March that showed that fund balance near 25%. Now, I look at a lot of the fund balance and I'm curious that what portion, I could be wrong, I don't know where it is now, I think that was back in March. So the first question would be is kind of where is it at? What is our percentage looking at right now as we head into finalizing the AFR and projecting the budget for next year? What does that look like specifically? What portion, what is the percentage of the assigned and unassigned fund balance?
We'll have to get
Okay.
back to you on that. I think the thing,
That's a critical question for us.
but the thing to really consider is the ebb and flow of our fund balance will change periodically throughout the year because of the
Right.
nature of how our revenue comes in.
Right,
And so we'll have months where we get very minimum revenue, and then obviously some months we get a lot. And so you'll see that fund balance grow and then come down. And you saw that on the chart of kind of how it goes in correlation. And so the real important part is where do we end up?
yes.
That's the
agreed.
important number.
Yeah, that's, you know, budget trainings across the state, it's what did we say we were gonna do and what do we actually do? That is what it comes down to. Because all those calculations, it's through time, your paycheck, like you said. So when we look at it over time, I think where I'm trying to go with the fund balance is that, when you show the ebb and flow, I really liked that. Is that all categories of the fund balance, or is that only the assigned and the unassigned portion of the fund balance?
That-
Yeah, I can go back.
That's our,
That's all of it.
it's our
Okay.
total general.
I think you're here.
How did you?
I'm clicking it for you.
Okay,
Here you go.
thank you.
Yeah,
Is
'cause
it
I think
moving?
it might have been turned off. So, okay, so this chart showing the ebb and flow is the whole fund balance, because we know, I think it's important, you've done such a great job of educating everyone on surveys and how we, you know, talk about the FEFP and the finance, but the fund balance is important too, because there are, you know, the restricted, committed, those portions that are not kind of that flexible money. And what is reported to the state, that 3% minimum, is really only just those two categories, the assigned and the unassigned, which is where we see, and I'm gonna say it here because I say it at the school board meetings, that's where that surplus is going and where we see continuing to raise that amount. So I think what we'll follow up with, because I know it's hard to say it right here without looking at the numbers, but looking at that breakdown of how much is committed, how much is assigned, how much is restricted, and how much is unassigned. Because I think, you know, that continues to beg the question, which, you know, we've said to the school board, and I think it's important for this team to bring it to the school board is the school board, you know, going to continue to budget conservatively in regard to building a surplus in the fund balance? And I know maybe you can't answer that now, but you are, you know, representing the school board. So I think it's an important question that when we send these questions, that you can come back and answer that.
May I jump in on fund
Yes.
balance? Everybody in the room knows I'm anti-fund balance. It's an insult to the taxpayers. It's an insult to everything that we're doing. And this slide right here is the reason why lawmakers are not raising the BSA. They will point at that and they will say that there is money in your district that is available that is not being spent. Now, we understand that there are a lot of different categories and different reasons, unassigned and assigned, but this is becoming prohibitive for all of the work that we're trying to do at this table. And then we talked about that the state came in and said we had to pay them $18 million. Every one of those fund balance numbers there was much higher than 3%, which is legal, but what they have to keep at by the law. At even 3%, we'd be able to handle that 18 million. Now, I understand that I'm going to call it the egregious fund balance allows us to front the millage money, but in actuality, that money should have already been flowing to the employees and to the sites, in my opinion, so that we weren't even in that spot. And we would gladly wait till January if these dollars were kept in the hands of the employees up until then, and that's creating and compounding a problem. And that's just something I always have to say. And then we always talk about, well, the rainy day, the hurricane. What's the extra expense in the hurricane? The employees that are getting paid, or aren't we saving money on gas with the buses and electricity, the buildings, and all the things that are not being spent when kids are not at school for those 11 days? I find that to be a really bad excuse, given statewide, well, we have to have this rainy day fund when everybody that's behind me is feeling like it's pouring every single day. So anyway, you know, I always have to give this speech. I hate the fund balance. I hate that we're always looking to expand on it. When I see 25%, my blood pressure goes up more than talking about, I don't know, getting days off for bereavement. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, Mr. Lewis. You knew it was coming.
Yeah, I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna continue, you know, we'll continue to talk about it, and we'll make sure that that question is in there to present to the board. You know, and when we looked at the budget for this year compared to what was spent last year, you know, we have an idea of kind of what we would estimate and expect to be a surplus. So at this time, do you have an idea of how much of a surplus funds budgeted for employee compensation, specific, probably to instructional and ESPs? Instructional is the biggest, you know, chunk of compensation, so it's kind of easy to look at, but how much of a surplus of those funds budgeted for employee compensation do you estimate to be left unspent due to, you know, unfilled vacancies?
Great question.
Yeah.
We'll get that.
'Cause I mean, we typically, I'll just say, you know, typically we're seeing over budgeting of around $100 million. I mean, that's what was budgeted, about $100 million more than what was actually spent. So it'll be interesting to see, and, you know, looking at where each monthly budget, where we are on that. Yeah, I think, you know, again, you know, how much has the school board intended to utilize for compensation increases for the 25-26? I think it stems from the question of, or, you know, the message that we're hearing from the school board of prioritizing pay. So I think that's something that, as you're preparing and looking at the budget, is how much can we really intend to pay for compensation? So again, probably don't have an answer right now, but.
Well, that's part of what the bargaining
Yes,
process
yes,
is,
yes.
right?
Does the school board have a priority? I mean, they talked about prioritizing salaries, but is there an intent to prioritize to address, use funds to address compression for newer employees, as well as honoring the veteran employees on both the instructional and ESP scale? Okay. Yeah, because we know that that's been an issue, right? Thanks to the raising of minimum pay, that's created all that compression. And have you all, I think what would be helpful for us to know is if you've done any cost modeling yet for the cost of just one step. Let's say if nothing changed, if everything stayed the same, what is a step cost for each of our groups? So probably don't have that now, but that would be a good one. And then also, if we could get an estimate for not longevity, all of our kind of previously agreed to one-time payments, like if we were just to continue that again, what does that look like? What's that cost analysis there? And if you all have done any modeling for additional, cost of living and that sort of thing. I think the next few questions are probably about proposals and things like that. So I have a question here that came about healthcare. So hopefully we can, I don't know if Ms. Schatzberg will be put on the spot, but the question we're getting a lot is, why is the healthcare so high for family members? I know you kind of summarize kind of like increasing healthcare, but, or maybe anyone can help with this, but just kind of a general answer on why is the healthcare so high or so costly for?
Oh, Tracy fell out of her chair.
I know.
What happened? You can answer that, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of us might know, I mean, it really, first off, we do healthcare like everything's going down, so we're trying to work on how to make sure we're getting good care without increasing where we can, but in the end, as Mr. Lewis indicated, the district spends going to be $190 million, 25 over 190 million just for the school year. And part of a big bulk of that is that in our contract language, in all of them, that we do cover a free premium plan, which I think is terrific. For the longest time I had it. So I'm not arguing, I can argue on both sides of it, please know. But when so currently, before we even increase next year, we're already spending about $110, $115 million just on that free plan. So if we continue to do that, it means that there's less to spend on the families. And so it's it's not a pass through because we do indeed contribute, and there are other districts like Pasco that they don't contribute at all. So we do try to, but it is something to consider. And I would like for you guys to maybe react, make sure that we're landing where y'all want to be.
We'll be doing that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
So a lot of teachers and a lot of parents have to get second jobs because of pay. We have a lot of parents in the district that have children with disabilities or students that, children that they have to get medical. I'm one of the people that brought up the question. I just think it's astronomical on what we were trying to. So if you're giving free healthcare to I'm not saying we give it to the families for free, but I think it's something like $400 extra pay period. I'm not exactly sure how much it is, and then $800 would be a little one. And then if you times that by the whole year, it's astronomical. Like you're already struggling because of the salary, and to put that burden on your people, teach your kids, that's not fair.
And Deb, I think that we're gonna be putting out a survey for all of our members to say, are they all willing to spend a monthly fee, like, pay, get rid of the free plan, so that way all of those other costs would come down. That means everybody would be helping put that bill. You know what I mean? That's ultimately what
So then it would break down.
Again, like, we have three different ways we can pay. Either monthly insurance, your copay, and then your deductibles. Right now, we have in contract a no cost to the employee plan. So the only way that when everything goes up, the only place that increase can go, because we have it protected in the contract, can be in the deductible or in the copay.
But if we do that, if we change the deductible to copay, would it be feasible for us to not have any plan?
Well, what we're saying is that if you want that deductible and copay to not be as high, then there has to be a monthly fee for the plan.
It can't be a free plan.
Again, we can go into it, and you're gonna have that Zoom on Friday, if you remember, so show up there, we can talk a little bit more about it, and Tracy's gonna join us for that, to help us with questions we can answer. But that's really where it lands.
I think ultimately, and Tracy's the expert, but when you have almost 24,000 employees on a free plan, I mean, that cost has to go somewhere.
Okay, I got one more. That was just that. Does the FTE projection include that new shift from Florida virtual to Hillsborough virtual?
So our district, yay, has finally decided to push our kids to Hillsborough virtual instead of approving all of their enrollments to Florida virtual, yay.
Right.
Securing positions for our local teachers instead of the charter school, which in addition will keep our money in Hillsborough County. So I'm just curious if the projections are including this new shift, that we are seeing a lot more kids, which is great. But is it including that, or are we just gonna wait to see what happens there?
It does include a significant portion already that's a target for our virtual school. And so I think our ship will help us attain that. And then the data will just show if we exceed that, that will be resulted in the surveys. And that's what's really important because we do the surveys throughout the year. That's giving you kind of a pulse rate on how you're doing in your enrollment. And so I think Hillsborough is a very good example of that. Different surveys will show how we're trending. And I think if you were to see a change, it would be for next year because the data would occur this year.
I'd just like to put on the table, thanking Mr. Lewis for his leadership with that. He had a lot of background. And knowing how we needed to, orchestrate that and what that needed to look like, for us as a district, and also Mr. Murillo, working very diligently on that. And so thank you, Michelle, for pointing that out. And that's gonna be something with our school counselors that we're gonna be, really emphasizing in our back to school training and everything, because it's gonna be a collective effort with all of us. But we're just starting on it, and
We're already seeing it. I see all the drafts for
There you
virtual,
go.
and I'm getting all the kids.
yay, so there we go.
Coming
The
through.
message
Yeah.
is getting.
And I'll jump on that
I'll make sure
bandwagon.
they complete the class, because we only get funding if they complete.
Hey, most districts are getting rid of their virtual component and they're funneling kids to Florida virtual. That is the only district, quote unquote, that doesn't have a union, by the way. Here, we're protecting that, and Michelle's a good example of, not only do we have Hillsborough virtual, and we're trying to make it more robust, but their members and their voices are heard here. So thank you, everyone, all around on that one.
Yeah. So I think we got, I brought the team because, some of this is new to some of our members, so I told them that if they have a question, they don't understand something, please ask.
It's kind of a three-part question about the same thing. Okay. Is the FTE number affected by schools that don't meet the FTE deadline? Can FTE change if schools finally turn in the data, or is it a permanent deadline? And is the fourth calculation not clear because schools may not have met FTE?
I'll take it in reverse order. That's okay. And then I'll probably ask you to repeat it, but I can't answer the question about the fourth calculation because I'm being honest, we don't know why of the delay.
But no one in the state has received their court calculation.
And we were just at the finance officers conference 2 weeks ago. And this is the conversation there. No one in the district, no one in any district has insights to that. So I don't know. I would be careful to jump to any conclusions about why the fourth calc isn't here. We have, I think one thing, and this is not defending them, but the hurricanes did impact everything. I think it impacted us, I think it personal level, I think it impacted everything. So we saw tax collector was delayed significantly. I think the state has been delayed. And so it's not an excuse, but I think that's just at some point it continues to delay and then it catches up with you. That could be a reason, but again, not jumping to conclusions there. About the FTE and something doesn't get reported a lot. I think whoever created the different surveys, that process, I think the reason that got developed in that way is so you continually have different checkpoints during the year in case potentially something got missed or something happened where maybe enrollment was lower during that survey period for whatever reason it might be. And so the different surveys are set up in case something did happen and it refreshes the data. And so that's why you have all those different surveys at different points in time. And so it allows us to make sure that it's as accurate as can be. And each of those surveys takes into account what happened previously. And so it's not, there's a whole kind of process where it accumulates all that information and then compiles it all together and it builds on top of each other throughout the year. So in case there is something that's abnormal for one of them, is taking all of that data to compute the best results.
How are they kept accountable?
We do have a district team that's their sole job. And they would be reaching out to those principals and making sure that all those were submitted. We have designated staff towards that. That's how important it is.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm
Yeah,
asking these
yeah,
questions.
that's a great
Those are
question.
good questions.
Yeah.
Those are great questions. All right,
I'll lead off from that one,
Okay.
that just, you know, those lights. I hate to even say the word out loud. Would synergy have affected some of this? Because some of us could never even get our schedules correct or our names on student schedules correctly. Could that have affected some of these counts?
Thank you. Dr. Leland?
So this closely, and with our transition, every correction window, we have been working within, the state back in December, even contacted us right before we were leaving for the holiday break to say, we think that your data look a little, off compared to what we have reported in the previous survey period. So to, Mr. Lewis's point about how that worked for stabilization. Well, some report didn't get uploaded in the way that it was supposed to. It was a little bit of a connection, but the team has been working very closely with that so that we are able to maximize all of our funding options that we have. But those that do IEPs, you know, if that IEP is not finalized by the deadline, it doesn't count for us at that time. So we don't get the weighted funding when it comes through on the windows. And we used to have an assistant superintendent that said, if we were as diligent about our attendance efforts every single day as we are within the FTE period, then we never miss getting a student counted, we never miss those dates, and we never miss those deadlines. And so it's really gonna be important for us next year, as well as we're transitioning to focus about our diligence in the reporting, in the attendance reporting, because I know our staff members were really frustrated about the system this past year. And so could there have been some missed opportunities, Leslie? Possibly, but the team was on it, calling the schools all the time, looking at those data reports, checking with that diligence. But there's always room for errors, but that's why the state does give us those correction opportunities. And they reopened it, especially just for us.
And I'll follow up too. There's a significant portion of the finance team, IT team who partner together on a frequent basis, more than just monthly, but that's our official. And you ask why is it so important to your question and to yours? So I personally sit on that group along with most of my training managers because it's that important. And we talk about, well, where's our outliers? And so we're not, to give you confidence, we're not just relying on the state to come back and give us that information. It's our lifeblood for our district. And so we take that and we're all members from both teams looking at it and saying, we see anything that's abnormal, where's our problems? And to Dr. Wayman's point, if there is a problem and we're reaching out to those folks, let's do a process, let's improve the process flow or where the problem is so we can recoup it. And to your point, that's why the surveys are so important, because if there is a problem, we fix it and the next survey is.
I have a question regarding FTE, working in ESD. That FTE is not, it has to be different for a center because we have medically fragile children that go to the hospital twice a month or are out because of therapies or because they couldn't get transportation. So they might be in regular attendance, but unfortunately for those specific 2 weeks, they're not. So that's not a true accountability of how many kids we really have. So I really think that that needs to be account for, because I don't know about regular school, but I know about the centers, that they're, I mean, one day we could have 50 kids, next day we could have 75 kids.
From the ESC.
Yeah, it's all the SE. So I really think that they need to take that into account when they're doing the FTE.
They do. I think there is part of the FDFP does account for, okay, here's your per student funding. And then there are, which it leads to a more complex question because there is additional funding for ESE. But the problem is, and we've been looking at this statewide, that different districts get different amounts. So I don't know if anyone here has the knowledge of why that happens. Why would Hillsborough be getting more for an ESC student than another county, or less.
Talking about the weighted factors, to
Yeah,
research that.
yeah,
We're getting more than.
yeah, well, every district does, so I think that's just the blanket answer is yes. There's per student funding, and then there's additional funding for ESE. The question deeper though is why would Hillsborough get more or less than other counties?
It's on the matrix.
Yeah.
And what, can we talk about what that is, to help people understand what that
The
matrix
maintenance
is?
level, it's the amount of support that each student needs in different areas.
Wow.
So,
Different areas of the state.
healthcare, you know, whether it's healthcare, independent functioning, education, curriculum, learning, oh
Okay.
gosh, I'm in summer mind right now.
Students.
Social, emotional,
Okay.
so it depends what level of support the child needs in each area, which comes up with a funding code. So then the county, from what I'm understanding, is paid based upon that funding code for that student.
It's the most complicated portion of
Right.
our FTE funding.
The higher the number, of course, you know, the higher the needs of the students, the higher the funding.
Okay. Does anybody else on the team that is here for the presentation have any other questions? I don't have any more. I will share with you my chart of questions. Some of them will maybe be easier to answer than others. Yeah, some will maybe more conceptual and, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
Thank you.
Yeah, so again, thank you. We'll see you on, yeah, I'll email to you. We'll see you on July 8th, right? At the SB, on July 9th at 9 a.m. July 9th for ESP. And then July 15th for our instructional unit, where we will, for both units, our goal is to have compensation proposals.
Good.
And, you know, we'll see where we go, you know us, we're gonna shoot for what we believe employees deserve and what they need, and then it's a matter of looking at it all, so. We'll see you then.
All right, thank you, everyone.